All right. Good evening, everybody. Let me call to order the regular meeting of the St. Helena City Council for Tuesday, February 28, 2017. Will the Vice Mayor lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Black, roll call.
Mayor Galbraith.
Here.
Vice Mayor White.
Here.
Councilmember Doring.
Here.
Ellsworth.
Here.
Koberstein. Here.
All right. Next item on our agenda is public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address us with respect to matters not on our agenda, with comment limited to 3 minutes. Does anybody wish to speak at public forum? Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members. My name is Laura Beltran, and I'm the new field representative for Assemblymember Cecilia Aguirre-Curry. I'll be covering the Napa County, parts of Sonoma and Solano and Lake County. I'll be working alongside Tracy Crumpin, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, and she's our district director now. So I'll be located at the Napa in the Napa office. We're now in American Canyon, but we'll be moving next week to where Senator Bill Dodd is at and Congressman Thompson, so we'll be under the same roof. I have passed out my business cards if you guys wish to contact me for any issues or anything that you guys would like to discuss with the Assemblywoman or meet with the Assemblywoman. Yes, I'm more than welcome to contact me. With that, thank you very much, and I look forward to meeting every one of you. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you and welcome.
Any further public comment?
George Kalianidis, Calistoga. A piece of disturbing information. The Department of Transportation just came up with a statistic for deaths in 2014. It takes them very long to do that because they have to compare apples to apples. So they compare number of residents to numbers of miles traveled. Among 58 counties in California, Napa Valley is number 7. Number 1 is worst, and number 58 is best. It's a very disturbing statistic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Any further public comment? Seeing none, we'll go to reports by staff and City Council, future agenda items, and AB 123 report, 1234 reports. Let me begin with the Interim City Manager, Mr. Pennell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the Council. I have one item this evening, Mr. Mayor. In an effort not to lose the momentum established at our February 4th goal session, I've tentatively scheduled and request that you call a special meeting, Mr. Mayor, for April the 6th at 4 p.m. We're scheduling staff presentations on budgetary needs, program needs, and items of special interest to the public. We're scheduling this, again, to start at 4 and end at 8 p.m., and it'll be right here at Vintage Hall at the high school, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. I will certainly direct staff to call the special meeting at that time.
Thank you very
much. Let's see. Ms. Mitz?
I will piggyback on our city manager. May 2nd and May 30th, we have set for our budget hearings. It will be from 9 a.m. to approximately 4 p.m. in the firehouse. May 2nd is set, and the 30th will be, it's on the calendar if it's necessary. In addition, I did want to report to the City Council and members of the public regarding the launch of the St. Helena Cares program for the low-income assistance for the water and wastewater rates, and it does offer a 50% discount to the base rate rates for water and wastewater. I have to thank Tracy Perkowski, our finance manager and grants manager, who aggressively was able to get this out in the week time frame that we said that we were going to get it out. What she has done is she has done a press release as well as put information on our website and has done a bill insert in the March water bills. In addition, brochures are available in the back of the room tonight. They're in City Hall and in the library. They're also available, and Tracy has reached out and is working with Rianda House and Up Valley Centers. So they are working as liaisons for us to try to get the word out regarding the low-income program. So information applications are available on our website by clicking City Departments, Finance, and Water Utility Billing. In addition, staff has done on-site presentations at Vineyard Valley, and we do have meetings set up with Rianda House, Up Valley Family Centers, and Stonebridge. And I know Up Valley is Spanish and English, so we're trying to reach out to all aspects of our community. Future meetings are in the planning stage with the other nonprofits and in the evenings, and again, both English and Spanish. The city is pleased to be partnering with Up Valley Centers, who will provide assistance to the Spanish speakers. And she wrote it in Spanish, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. But currently, as of today, we had over 45 new applications have been received since the program launched. So in a week, we've received 45 new applications. And right now, for the current funding levels for this fiscal year, it was approved, I believe, $80,000 for the total year. And we're about 50% subscribed right now in just 1 week of the program.
Okay, very good. I'm pleased to hear that. Ms. Black?
I am still accepting applications for the ad hoc committee, so for the rate review. So if council, if you need any additional applications to share with any of your constituents, let me know and I'll get them to you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brown?
The City Council met this afternoon in a special closed session to discuss those items that were designated as items 4.1 through 4.4 on the agenda posted for that meeting. No reportable actions were taken.
All right. Chief and Bowden? All right. Am I missing any other senior staff? I don't think so. Okay. Oh, over there. Well, after a long airplane trip, I'm not looking left, I guess.
I'd like to announce the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. We're having a workshop on March 29th to go have a little brief interlude on the feasibility study and discuss alternatives. It'd be March 29th. We're tentatively scheduling it for the fire station. I got to confirm that it's available. And we'll have slides up and give a brief presentation in the beginning about where the feasibility is taking us with the treatment plant and provide any other updates that we do at the time.
Okay, very good. Mr. Hausch?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
All right. Ms. Koberstein? Mr. Ellsworth?
I was just going to say, for anybody who comes to speak, we have water in the back. Sometimes that helps if somebody has to get up and speak, just so they know the bottles in the back are for everybody here.
Good. Mr. Doring?
I have nothing, thank you.
Mr. White?
Yes. Last Thursday, the WIC, which is the Watershed Information and Conservation Council, held a workshop on the county's climate action plan, and they did extend the comment period till March 10th, so you can go to the Napa County, or it's the countyofnapa.org's website and submit any comments that you have. And then also there's a Napa County Watershed Symposium that'll be held May 24th at the Blue Note, which is on Main Street in Napa. So just save the date for that. That's an all-day workshop. The Napa County Watershed Symposium, May 24th. That's it.
All right, very good. I have nothing, so that takes us to staff briefing. We have none, at least under 6.1. Consent items. Again, with respect to consent items, any member of the public or any council member may remove the item from consent, and then we go through the normal process. 7.1, consideration of proposed approval of a resolution to award purchase order at the amount of $29,449.22 to Folsom Ford for one 2017 Ford Interceptor with police package under Municipal Code Section 3.04.150, cooperative purchasing with other agencies. 7.2, consideration proposed adoption of resolution awarding a construction contract for 2016 Pavement Overlay Project R78 to Team Ghilotti Inc. in the amount of $272,836.50 and authorizing the Director of Public Works to approve change orders not to exceed 15% of the contract amount. Short consent calendar. Does anybody want to remove either item? No. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Black?
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Ellsworth?
Yes.
Oberstein?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. The next item, public hearing, consideration of 8.1, consideration and proposed approval of resolution approving the annexation of territory into the St. Helena Municipal Sewer District Number 1, MSD Annexation Number 131 at 1486 Sulphur Springs Avenue, St. Helena. Let's see, do we have a staff report on this one? Ms. Smithies? We do have a staff report, but who is it? Are you the person that's presenting it?
I am the presenter. Is this a standard sewer annexation? Excuse me. We have a standard sewer annexation at the Sulphur Springs subdivision at 1486. And they are looking to build and would like to annex into our district. It's a 4-unit housing site, and I guess that's it for now. We haven't come back for a final map yet, but we're close.
Okay. Very good. Is there any council discussion? Let me open the public hearing. Does anybody wish to speak at public hearing on this matter? Let me close the public hearing. Is there any further council discussion? Is there a motion to approve the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Black?
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Oberstein?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. That takes us to new business. The first item of new business is executive recruitment firms for the recruitment of a new city manager and authorize the interim city manager to execute a professional services agreement contract for the recruitment of the city manager or take other action relative to the recruitment of a city manager. Staff, I think, is Ms. Robinson.
Yes. Excuse me. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. Tonight we're asking you to review proposals received for the recruitment services for the city manager position. A brief summary of how we got here. On December 2nd, the city released a request for proposal for executive recruitment services for the city manager. The responses were due on January 10th, 2017, and the city received 3 responses from Ralph Anderson Associates, Terry Black and Company, and Bob Murray and Associates. On February 23rd, Terry Black and Associates withdrew their proposal, citing that they had acquired substantial recruitments and would not be able to provide the level of service that they pride themselves on. And they hope that the city would still consider them in future RFPs. The remaining 2 proposals were within $25 of each other, with Ralph Anderson at $24,375 and Bob Murray at $24,400, with both firms providing about the same level of services as summarized on attachment 2 of your package, and it looked like that. To further expand on their expertise and what each firm can offer the City Council in terms of their recruitment services, we have invited both firms to give a brief 10-minute presentation. Following each presentation, there will be a Q&A for City Council members, and at the conclusion of the last Q&A, we ask that City Council provide a recommendation to award the contract or take other action relative to the recruitment of the city manager. And so today, first to present, I would like to introduce Mr. Gary Peterson as Project Director for Ralph Anderson and Associates.
Very good.
Thank you.
Mr. Peterson?
Welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Mayor, members of the City Council, members of the public, good evening. I'd like to start by introducing myself. I'm Gary Peterson. I'm with Ralph Anderson Associates. I'm a senior consultant. Our firm has been in business for 45 years. I joined Ralph Anderson a couple years ago after a 26-year career in local government. I retired in 2014 as the police chief for the city of Martinez. So I spent my entire career there. as a city council appointed police chief the last 4 years. So I have firsthand knowledge and experience working with city councils in the capacity as a recruiter and as an employee. I think that gives me a little bit of an advantage. And so it'll allow me to help you and guide you through this process, because this really is your process. I've worked with city managers, department heads in both capacities, and my experience has provided me with a strong understanding of the functions of local government and the subtleties involved in selecting local government leaders. So let's briefly talk about the process. Ms. Robinson, in her staff report, outlined both proposals are in there. She outlined the services that we provide. She said they're very similar, and I agree they are very similar. But just to review, Ralph Anderson Associates uses 8 steps. We initially will come out after the contract's been awarded and meet with the City Council and any stakeholders that the City Council would like us to meet with on that first day we're in town. And we do that to help develop and build the position profile. And once that occurs, we develop a brochure, and that's used for the advertising piece for the recruitment. One thing that's unique about Ralph Anderson Associates is we pride ourselves on the community engagement piece. So we deal with issues of inclusion, community trust building, and transparency. So included in our proposal is not just the one day of stakeholder meetings. We offer an additional day that's included in the price that allows us to meet with members from the community. We recommend a broad-based approach. Other community leaders, faith-based organizations, Chamber of Commerce, business leaders, to get everyone's input. It struck me when I was watching the goal-setting session on the video that several of the speakers talked about transparency, and transparency starting with this recruitment. And I know that I've watched other sessions, and there already is some transparency going on. But I do agree with the speakers that transparency is an issue, and in local government in this day and age, it's something we should always be mindful of. So after the profile is developed and all the information is incorporated into the position profile, like our competitors, we do outreach and recruiting, and that involves utilizing the resources that are available to us. And most firms have done several city manager searches, and they have candidates that from previous recruitments and others, and they develop a recruiting pool. And then after the position closes, we all evaluate the candidates. And then we bring the candidates to the City Council, and we provide a recommendation to the Council on who should be interviewed. And then we take your input, and we finalize the interview process. We work with staff to develop the interview questions. And then there's a selection process. Ralph Anderson tailors a selection process to meet your needs. So if the council wants to have a community panel or a staff panel, we facilitate that. And then after the finalists are selected, we will facilitate a Meet the Candidates night. And that's an opportunity for members of the public to meet with the candidates. And this is very tricky in this day and age because some of those candidates are already employees elsewhere. And so we have to balance that and see how that works out as we move forward. And then after the final selection, we help with the contract and the press release to make sure that the candidate's presented to the community in an appropriate way. So I'll take any questions you have this time.
Are there any initial questions of Ms. Doring?
How do you address the situation where when you're developing your profile, you're met with conflicting profile characteristics, either from the community or from the council or wherever, where you say, I want this person A, and someone else says, I want someone with completely different characteristics. How does your firm address that issue?
Well, the city council is our client. Okay, so we weight the characteristics, and some weigh more heavily depending on the council is going to carry a little bit more weight because they're representing the public, and so we're not going to change the profile based on one person. If the entire community is saying one thing and the council saying another, that's a conversation that we'd have with the council and let them know, hey, this is what we're hearing in the community, because I'm sure you want that feedback. So that's how we'd resolve it.
Thank you.
How many candidates would you bring in initially, or is there is there a standard?
Sure. Depending on the number of candidates that apply for the position and that we're able to recruit, generally speaking, we want to bring back 10 to 12 candidates to present to the city council. And then from that position, the city council normally will winnow that down to 4 to 6 candidates to interview.
I have perhaps one question that's always intrigued me, and that is search firms represent clients. Here you're representing the city of St. Helena. Are there ethical standards in your business whereby if you represent a client, say the city of St. Helena, you don't then recruit against the city of St. Helena for other cities? How does that work?
Well, our firm has a policy that we don't recruit against the firms that we represent.
Okay.
So some firms will say they won't recruit for a year. We just flat don't do it.
Okay. Very good. Any other initial questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Are there some like current issues or hot topics in city manager recruitment that we should be aware of?
Well, I think the biggest issue, not only in city manager recruitment, but nationwide with the conversation around policing, is the issue of transparency. And that is the biggest issue. And so one of the things that we do to make sure that you're getting someone and we're presenting someone to you that's transparent is we do solid background checks. We check their public profile on the internet, and we dig deep to make sure that when we say that this person is who they say they are, they really are, and that you're not getting someone who got a DUI last month.
I had a question, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Mr. Peterson, would you share with the council what role your firm would play in assisting the city council adjust and consider changes in the compensation and benefit plans?
Certainly. That is one of our roles, is having that initial discussion with the city council on what the compensation market looks like out there for city managers. And we would talk about that, and we have some proprietary information. We have a compensation side of the house in our business that does compensation studies, and we have information that we could provide and help the city council make a decision whether it needs to go, the salary is fine or it needs to go up.
Okay.
And we provide that as part of the recruitment process.
All right. Any further initial questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce Mr. Gary Phillips, Executive Vice President, and Valerie Phillips, President of Bob Murray and Associates.
Mayor and Council, thank you so much. We appreciate this opportunity, and we appreciate the fact that you're considering our firm for this important hire. Valerie and I own the firm, Bob Murray & Associates. Valerie is the president. And so the two of us work together doing executive recruitments. We took over the firm about 3 years ago. And as Mr. Peterson pointed out, all of the firms, I think, in this space do a good job, and we all do a very similar. The work product that we provide is very similar. There are some differences, though. And as he pointed out, some of those. One of the things that the approach that I like to take, and by the way, if you did go with our firm, it would be me that would be doing the recruitment. And I personally have done over a dozen city manager recruitments just in the last couple years. So I've got some good experience working with councils to get through this process. But one of the things we like to do early on, we like to craft a process that works for this community. And each community and each council might want something a little bit different. The stakeholders that are involved, whether the community is involved on the front end, whether they're involved in the back end and panels, we don't like to dictate that to you. We like to meet with you up front and say what works for your community, and we'll craft a process that best suits those needs. So the steps that we follow are very similar. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come out on site, I'm going to meet with council, and I'm going to hear from each one of you individually what you think is important in your next city manager. What are the issues and challenges that the community is currently facing that you think will help kind of drive and dictate what kind of background and experience this person's going to need? The skill set that the last city manager may have worked great and helped get through some financial issues, but maybe now you guys are facing some different challenges, and so that may change the profile a little bit of who you're looking for in your next city manager. So I like to meet with you and understand that, because I can't understand that good enough until I've met with all of you. That will help craft that ideal candidate profile. And then, of course, I'll meet with any other stakeholders that you want me to meet with, whether it's community stakeholders, staff, executive team, and we'll compile a description of an individual that may sound a little bit like a unicorn. It'll be a little bit of everything, right? We know that. But remember, the purpose of this tool is to attract as many candidates as possible, right? We want to cast a broad net, and we want to be able to take those individuals and focus them down. There's more than just their background and their degrees and their work experience, but there's also style and fit. And that's hugely important for a city manager position. Their management style, their leadership skills, those are the intangibles that don't show up on a resume. And those are the things that I'm going to try to identify when I meet with you. Get into that profile and describe the characteristics of the individual as well as the background and experience. And then as I'm recruiting and talking to candidates, because I've done so many city manager recruitments, I have a lot of folks that I talk to all year round, and I'll start thinking about folks that I know their personality, and I know their style and their fit, and I know kind of their career and how that fits in. That's the other thing we want to look at. This is a small community, right? So the types of candidates that you're going to attract are going to be different than a 100,000 population city, right? So it has to make sense for them. It has to make sense for you. What's motivating someone to want to come to St. Helena? Is it the right thing? You want somebody that's going to give you longevity. You don't want somebody that's going to use this as a stepping stone, in a couple years and out. So those are the kind of things that I try to pay attention to as I'm talking to candidates. And so we're going to go out there and do a lot of outreach. We're going to mail out probably 250 of those pretty brochures that you see. But we're going to target specific sizes of cities, specific job descriptions, whether it's department heads or assistant city managers that are ready for that next step, or whether it's city managers of smaller cities where this makes sense for them. It's a lifestyle change, and a quality of life reason that they want to get here and be part of your community. So we're going to target folks very specifically that way. We're going to do lots of outreach. We're going to attract, in this day and age, we're going to attract probably 30 to 50 applicants is what I'm seeing in the city manager recruitments I'm doing right now. Of those, it'll probably be about 10 or 12 that will be good qualified candidates. I'll do preliminary interviews with all of those. I'll do a Skype or FaceTime with each one of them, a 1-hour session, so I can kind of drill down and get to know them a little bit better before I present them to you. Once I come back and meet with council in closed session and present, I'll be able to make recommendations based on my personal experience with my interviews with them. And then out of those, 10 to 12, it could be 5 to 6. Usually 6 is about the max that a council can get through in a full day. It's usually a full day interview process for council. We recommend that the council do the first set of interviews. If this is your hire, got to make sure that anybody that's going to go any further in the process is someone that you guys approve of. We usually like to take that down to 2 or 3 finalists, and those finalists would then be more fully vetted with the backgrounds and reference checks, so that when those finalists come before whatever kind of panel system we craft together, we know that they've been fully vetted. And that could be a community panel, it could be a community panel and a staff panel. And I would be back on site that day to facilitate that whole process, to help manage the panels. We write the questions for those panels, and we help deliberate with each one of those panels and make recommendations to you. One of the things that I really enjoy is I like working with an elected body to help you guys steer you to consensus and a decision. It's one of the most important decisions that you're going to make as a council, and so I think it's really important that you guys all agree as much as possible on who that person's going to be, and I enjoy that part of the process quite a bit. And any questions?
Any initial questions?
Talk a little bit about your experience with respect to working with small cities. And just a follow-up to that question, is it your experience, is it typical that when you're dealing with small cities that the likely pool of potential applicants are closer to the small city than, say, a larger city? If you understand what I mean.
You mean geographically?
Geographically, yeah. Would we likely expect more candidates from, like, Northern California coming from small cities? From your experience, and maybe there's no magic science to that, but I'm
yeah,
just curious.
I really haven't noticed that small cities drive that in one way or the other. We will cast a national net. One of the things that I'll do when I meet with the council members individually is to say, "Are you open to out-of-state candidates? If you guys are pretty adamant that you want somebody from California for various reasons, then we'll still cast that wide net, but we'll make sure that we bring you only California candidates." We've successfully brought in out-of-state candidates before, and they've done quite well. So I don't know that I've necessarily seen that. I think because of the location, this is going to be a very desirable location for folks, particularly from other states. What we do with out-of-state candidates, though, is we make sure that they do their homework and they go on Zillow and look what housing costs are and things like that. I like to make sure that we screen them out up front if once they get the sticker shock and they can't afford to move here. But I do think that you're going to get a good pool of candidates from larger cities regionally because it's a good career move for them because they're ready for that next step. One of the things that Valerie and I take pride in is we're very actively involved in the MMANC, which is the Municipal Managers Association of Northern California and Southern California, Women Leading Government. These are organizations where people who are moving up through the ranks in municipal government are all part of these organizations. And we actively sponsor those organizations and participate in their meetings. So we network with the folks that might be great candidates for this opportunity in that regard, as well as existing city managers.
Do you have somebody already in mind for the position?
Several.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Other initial questions? Let me ask you the same question that I asked Mr. Peterson, and that is, with St. Helena having been a client in your case, and if we choose you again, does that mean that your firm, as a matter of policy, does not recruit folks working for the same city of St. Helena for other positions?
So we don't actively recruit. When we send out brochures, we won't call out to our clients, right? We'll send brochures out, but we don't actively go after our clients' folks. 2 years, we're not going to, even if somebody calls us, we'll say, look, we just placed you there. We really can't be talking to you if they contact us.
Okay.
So that's our policy, is we're not going to actively recruit for 2 years.
Were you personally involved in the prior recruitment?
I personally was not.
Okay. I believe it was your firm. I wasn't involved, but it was your firm that was involved in the prior recruitment.
Yeah, and most recently I did Valerie and I did the city manager recruitment for Ghilotti, which isn't too far from here. It's another small city. The mayor there, you could call the mayor there and ask him, about working with us. We've also done quite a few. I did a couple recruitments for Sonoma County for the Board of Supervisors there. So I've got experience working with small cities, which is a little bit unique. The city of Gridley, I don't know if you've heard of them. Yeah. I did their city administrator recently. So they're another small community.
Okay, good. Mr. Doring?
I was just going to say, out of fairness, we asked different questions of the other candidate. If there's anything else you want to add, or I feel like the questions are fairly balanced, and you touched upon my question in your introduction, but if there's anything else there, either one of you, I think it's appropriate because the questions are different. If you feel compelled to get up and respond to one, or if you feel compelled, we're fair and transparent here.
Yeah, I'm fine. I don't think you guys can go wrong either way. I'll just tell you that. I think Ralph Anderson's a great firm, and yeah, if you did ask different questions, so if you feel like I'm good with the information that I've provided, we would love the opportunity to work with you, and I would love the opportunity to help you find your next city manager. And whichever way you go, I wish you guys the best.
All right, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure. Sure.
Not rebuttal, but sure rebuttal. No, Ralph Anderson Associates would also really enjoy doing the recruitment. We've done smaller cities too. We just finished up Belvedere, and I'm currently at the mid-stage process for the city of Loomis, which is a very small city near Rockland in Placer County. So we've done small cities as well, and we've done big cities. I just finished the San Francisco police chief recruitment, which was an ordeal in itself, with 5 community engagement meetings, surveys all over the place, 18 meetings. So we've done big and small. So we would be happy to assist. We think we have a strong candidate pool ready to go as well, and I don't think you can go wrong either way. All right, thank you.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, is there any public comment at this point? Okay, I'll close the public comment.
Flip a coin.
Invite council discussion. I think we all appreciate the presentation of each of you, and I think it's a very hard choice for us because we perceive great equality between the firms, just as you perceive great equality between the firms, between yourselves. And so it's very hard for me to express a preference, but perhaps as mayor, unless other members of the city council would like to lean in first, I would say most marginally, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way at all, an exemplary way, but my preference after listening to both of you is for the Murray firm, and mainly because I think the firm has more experience, from what I hear, at recruitment of city managers for small cities, and I'm impressed with the thought that they could gather the number of applicants initially and whittle them down and move us right along. It's not to say the other firm can't do it as well. It's just what came across to me. That's about all I can say.
Was that a motion?
No, just as no. Does anybody have any?
I would say the same thing, but I would choose the other firm and say the same thing.
Okay. All right.
I think after listening to both and having experience with Bob Murray's firm before, I think they've done a good job, and I think they've got the experience across a lot of smaller cities. So it's my preference.
Mr. Ellsworth?
I feel the same, that it's almost impossible to make a choice. And thank you for being here and considering us. The only thought is that if you've worked with the city of St. Helena, the firm that's worked with the city of St. Helena before, then I think maybe there's some experience here. That goes, and that would be the second proposal from Bob Murray and Associates, just because of the fact that they've worked here before, and that's the only thing I can
differentiate.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Coberstein?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think my choice would be Bob Murray, and it's very hard for me to put in words why. I think you're both obviously very well qualified. I just have sort of a feeling of how we might relate as we go through this process, and I do think it's helpful that your firm has been here before, not necessarily you, but I think that could help us in the long run also.
I would simply note in terms of equivalence, it's amazing that the bids were within $25 of each other. Absolutely extraordinary in a sealed bid situation. Right. All right. At this point, the chair would entertain a motion to hire Bob Murray and Associates as the search firm.
So moved.
I'll second.
Ms. Black?
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Ellsworth?
Yes.
Toberstein?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. Again, thank you very much for coming, and we appreciate very much, Mr. Peterson, your coming, and we look forward to working with
Thank you for coming.
the Phillipses.
Thank you.
And I especially hope you folks are successful.
That's right.
All right, next item up is item 9.2, presentation of ADA evaluation transition plan. And Mr. Barr, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Tobias Barr. I'm a project manager in Public Works. I hadn't had all the opportunity to meet the new members yet, so hi, look forward to working with you. I'm just going to give a quick background on this just to refresh everybody and bring everybody up to speed, and then invite our consultant up to go through the plan. And again, we're still asking for comment. We're not asking you to adopt the plan at this time. And so this is the ADA Evaluation and Transition Plan. We started on this project in fall 2015 recruiting consultants, and in January 2016, Interwest contract was approved by council, and we kicked off the project shortly after that. And this involved reviewing city programs and surveying staff and different departments, as well as taking a close look at the facilities and curb ramps and inventorying all those in town, and closely inspecting all the facilities. A report was drafted and then circulated internally to staff. So this version that you're seeing now has already been circulated internally to city staff and incorporated those comments. And then we released the plan for public comment on January 25th, and that is open until March 17th. We have a survey on the website that folks can take, and folks can also take the survey. We have paper surveys. I have them here. They're at City Hall. They're at the library. Folks can print them at home and bring them in. So we're hoping to get comments that way. And we also had a public workshop on February 15th for 2 hours from 5 to 7. And I think, Mayor, you remember you were there.
I sure do.
So we did get a couple comments there. Haven't had a lot of survey responses. We're still hoping to get some more. Beyond that, we've reached out to a number of folks in town. Napa Valley Coalition of Nonprofits, Napa Valley College, Rionda House, Chamber of Commerce, the St. Helena Community Food Pantry, St. Helena Family Resource Center, the Rec Department, the school district, St. Helena Hospital, and the Vine Shuttle and NTV, the Transportation Authority, NTVA. So with that, I think I'll hand it over to Theron Roschen from Interwest Consulting Group, and he's going to give you some more information on the plan, on the proposed plan.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Theron Roschen with Interwest. I'm a civil engineer with them, and in my past life, I was with Sacramento County as their chief engineer, so I've gone through this before. What is an ADA transition plan? That's kind of what we want to describe today. Which one do I push?
I think I need to. I'm going to. I think I'll just move to another chair.
Sure, it's usually this button here. Maybe Cindy needs to. Oh, there it is. We just got to point it that way.
Oh,
I think that's the computer.
okay. Which one? This one here?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so ADA was passed by Congress many years ago, and it's really a civil rights law, and it's to give equal access to the disabled community to, in a city's function, primarily access to public facilities. It's your buildings that have a public counter. It's your parks. it's your roadway curb cuts, things of that nature. And the law requires that agencies prepare a self-evaluation and transition plan. Basically, an inventory of your facilities, what is deficient, and what steps and timeline are you going to take to invest in improving to be in compliant with the law. That's it in a nutshell. We've prepared this plan, which is quite, I don't know if you've looked through it at all, quite a bit of effort going into reviewing the facilities, and we have experts that are certified for ADA compliance. Particularly on the building side, you see a lot of information there. Oops, I beg your pardon. So, as Tobias mentioned, we in this plan, the city did a lot of self-evaluation. We worked with city staff to kind of do their evaluation of their processes. It's also programs like the city council meeting this evening, ADA compliance for the hearing impaired, sight impaired, and it has some recommendations in there for how to accommodate those disabilities. Also the procedures on how you handle that. Designating a person to be in charge of overseeing compliance. And were you volunteered or did you volunteer? I think Tobias is your designated person. And then the plan itself, which identifies the physical modifications necessary to achieve compliance. So the goals of the plan are to develop the policy recommendations for each department, ensure the views of the public and disabled communities are heard and incorporated into those policies, and that's part of that open dialogue that needs to be created. This is a living document. You will get more requests as you go along. We've done our level best to identify everything that's out there, but there'll be other issues that come up, and this has a procedure in order to accept those. I don't want to call the word complaint, but notification is probably a better word, and how to put them into your priority list. So these physical barriers that we've listed, again, they're focusing on parks, buildings, and streets. We outlined the methods that you're going to be to remove those barriers, and they can be physical improvements, they can be accommodation, or let's take, for example, at a park, through signage and designation of the path of travel for the ADA person, you can have one access point. So you can limit how much physical improvements you have to do. What the plan also does is we've developed some cost estimates and a prioritization of the locations within the city, and they're kind of based on we focused around schools, certainly, around places where the elderly might have to go, public transit, things of that nature, places where the public interface with the disabled community is of highest priority. And that's part of, we want to get that input from the disabled community, as Tobias mentioned, the outreach that has taken place, to get that priority. But we've taken a shot at that. And again, having a person responsible for us. The survey forms that were sent out, the draft plans on your website, as Tobias mentioned. We have the public open house. In the final document, it's going to have a list of every survey that we received, by how many people, and response to each of those comments. And again, the comment period closes March 17th. So the main elements of our plan is that you have the policies, procedures, and program elements. There's some recommendation there about how to conduct accommodation. You have the architectural barrier removal, and this is at buildings and parks. And then the curb ramp improvements. So let's drill down into those. For the policies and procedures, we have kind of a lengthy list, but to summarize, it's training your staff is a big part of it, having the adaptive aids available, making modifications in your procedures to allow disabled individuals to participate in your programs, and then a review of the municipal code to identify corrections, and we have a few in there, and then the transition plan, it needs to be amended. Like I said, this is a living document. There we go. See, it's lagging. I beg your pardon there. Okay, so now we're on the Okay, go back. Go to the architectural. There we go. Okay, so this is a listing of the structures and parks that we looked at. I hope we haven't missed anything, but I want to highlight that this is the public side of the building. We didn't look at where the employees are. This is where you would intake a public individual into all these buildings. So you can see them listed there, and then the parks as well. In the document, we have photos of all the non-compliant elements with cost estimates and recommendations that go with that. Generally, the bathroom, it seems to be and parking access to the buildings. And it's interesting, ADA compliance is kind of a moving target. The building code goes hand in glove with ADA compliance, so keeping abreast of how the building code is evolving is another kind of challenge that Tobias will have to make this a living document, as I mentioned. Next slide. The next is an exhibit of the curb ramps, and you have 395 in the city, and 328 are not compliant. That's kind of a dramatic number to look at. And you might drive by a curb and you'll see that it has the sloped ramp, but again, the law has evolved, so you need truncated domes on those so that the sight-impaired person can tap their cane and know that they're at that. It needs to be, the slope has changed a little bit, and even the interface between the lip of the gutter and the pavement has changed too. So this is a daunting number, and so what we tried to do is come up with a prioritization of those so that we are focusing the limited city dollars on priority locations. So we've come up with that. Next slide. So if we were to do, from a budget perspective, we didn't put a cost estimate to the policies, procedures, and program accessibility. I think that's something that city staff can kind of incorporate into their daily activities. For the city facilities, we used a priority 1, 2, and 3. And the estimated construction cost on that is about $656,000. For curb ramps, we prioritize them through a 1 through 9 ranking, and the criteria is in the report. That's about $759,000. So from a construction point of view, it's about $1.4 million. And if you add in 25% for the design, the right-of-way that you might have to take, hopefully not too much, and then the inspection, we're looking at about $1.8 million of investment by the city to bring it up to ADA standards. Next slide. So the reality is that we have to have kind of a realistic time frame. One of the tenets of ADA is that it can't be a burden to the city to implement this overnight. And you all have to kind of come up with that assessment of how you weigh your general fund or other funding sources you have versus the implementation of this plan. And we've worked with staff to kind of come up with a reasonable approach to implementation. So a phase 1 would, for the curb ramps as an example, we would try to target the priority 1 through 4 projects within the first 5 years. And that totals about $45,000 a year that would be allocated. As we move out into the outer years, priorities 5 through 6 would be in a 10-year time frame, and then the remaining ones in a 15-year time frame. The investment in year priority 2s were $45,000 annually, and then the cleanup work would be about $20,000 annually. Now, a key note here is most of the capital improvement projects, maintenance projects, anything in the street, you're compelled to do ADA improvements. The only kind of waiver on that is if you're putting a slurry seal, which is just kind of an oil coating on the roadway, that's deemed as maintenance. But an overlay, a chip seal, any kind of pavement treatment beyond the slurry is going to trigger ADA improvements with that project. most of those projects are funded through grants that you get, and so you can whittle away at this list through your capital improvement program. So that's on the road side, that's really a nice thing. Now let's jump to the harder ones, the facilities. So we targeted Priority 1 projects within 7 years, minimum budget of about $80,000 per year. To complete the Priority 2 improvements, that's a 10-year time frame, $15,000 per year allocated. And then Priority 3, 15-year time frame with about $8,000. So there might be some improvements to public facilities, libraries, things of that nature that, again, you might be able to capitalize on that priority. But I would caution you when you're taking action as a council to approve your budget or approve your capital improvement program, that these priorities be given consideration as you kind of walk through your priority list for improvements or the grants that the city goes after. So, next slide, please. So the next step, any comments you have on the draft ADA evaluation that's out there? As Tobias mentioned, we'll be back to you with a resolution adopting our plan, but in that we need to make some recommendations about a funding source to address these ADA needs, and then direct staff to continue to monitor and coordinate and evolve the plan as needed. I'm going to close on a kind of a bad note. So for many years, the ADA has been around since the 70s, right? And so for many years, a lot of agencies just didn't really do much with it. The federal government last year has started, if you follow the federal dollar to capital improvement projects, Caltrans administers those dollars. They kind of flow through Caltrans to the Council of Governments, and the money flows out. So they're now requiring some certification by the cities that they have an ADA transition plan, and they can close off that federal funding if you don't have this plan. So really, think of this as leveraging your investment on a transition plan leverages a lot more dollars because you're getting grants for federal improvements. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I'm throwing pins all over the place.
Well, about all I can say is there's a tremendous amount to absorb in this report, and leaves me speechless. But obviously, we're going to need to focus on this in our budget session, and we're going to need to set aside money. I assume general fund money because I can't think of any other source, but maybe I'm not being sufficiently imaginative. I keep saying to myself, why can't I have a Federal Reserve Bank in St. Helena and have it make money for us? But that's not going to happen. But it's obvious that we're going to have to tackle some of these projects and budget for them to bring ourselves into compliance with having an ADA plan. I mean, it's not about where we are.
Yeah. Again, take a good hard look at your capital improvement program. Try to click off ones that you're already funding through those. And I don't know if this is a lot of agencies can. If you make that decision about that it's an undue burden to the city, you certainly can make recommendations to push out the implementation. What you risk is a challenge by an advocate or someone challenging that. But agencies have looked at the hard reality of the burden it places on your other services you provide to the city. So that's the challenge that's before you, is to weigh those.
Okay.
It's a risk association.
I have a question.
Sure.
So if a plan is in place and implementation is in process, does that lessen your exposure to, say, a lawsuit? Or, I mean, does that help if there is a challenge that the plan is in place and you are following a implementation process, even if you're not there yet?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It shows good faith on the city's behalf that you have a plan in place, you're doing your best to implement it.
Okay.
And part of the outreach with the stakeholders is to make that negotiation.
Thank you.
All right. Any further initial comments? Let me invite public comment, if you will. Does anybody wish to comment publicly?
Yes, my name is Bobby Monette. I'm speaking as a resident, and I have a question. I couldn't read the list well enough. I didn't know if Stonebridge was one of the places that was looked at, because that is not a public place, but it is a place where there are seniors, many seniors who are in walkers and disabled, and there have been a couple of falls there's no ramp, but there's a driveway, and there's not the lip on the driveway. People have fallen there with their walkers already, and it has come to the city's attention in the past couple of years already. So I was just wondering if that wasn't part of what was looked at, if there would be any way to get that to be part of that seems like a really important one, because there are so many disabled seniors at that address, at Stonebridge on Hunt Street, and I think that's the only public. That's the only. Woodbridge. I'm sorry, Woodbridge.
Woodbridge.
I'm sorry. I have no brain. But, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if that was part of it. And if it wasn't part of it, is there a way to get it in there at all? That's my question.
All right, thank you very much.
So I think I know what you're talking about there, and there is no existing sidewalk. And this plan and the requirements of the ADA in terms of roads, and correct me if I'm wrong, Theron, strictly look at curb ramps. So the city will need a separate program for sidewalk maintenance. And that
Is the sidewalk maintenance part of ADA or just part of bringing our facilities up to some reasonable level?
it does not fall within the requirements of the ADA. Is that correct, Theron?
Yeah, sidewalk maintenance, if you have off-sites, that's assumed to be part of your normal maintenance activities. So this report didn't inventory existing sidewalks between corners. It's assumed that that's just part of the normal city maintenance, and if someone complains about it, they go out and take care of it.
Right, and the same would be true where there are no sidewalks.
Right, that usually, a lot of agencies, as their improvement standards, don't even have sidewalks as their standard. And you have plenty of those roads as well.
Right.
So you're protected by your improvement standards of what your requirements are.
Okay. All right, any further public comment? Let me close public comment and invite any further council discussion.
I assume that this plan does not really get into the legal analysis, especially on newer projects that were done that may have been deficient in some way. We didn't go through that analysis to say, hey, wait a minute, you left this ADA non-compliant, something in the last 3 or 4 years. We haven't drilled down that far, right?
No, sir, we have not. It assumes that by the city approving that development, you've accepted the burden of that public improvement.
All right.
All right, any further discussion by council?
I just have one point. With some of our public facilities, these are some of the very facilities we're talking about either replacing or renovating. And it seems like we should sort of drill down on what we're going to do there. Because if we do intend to replace, say, the police station or whatever, I take it we can put off some of these improvements as long as we're moving forward with a replacement facility that's compliant. I would hate to put the money into something that we turn around demolishing later.
Yeah, I would say that this is a straw man that's been put together, and it's a living document, so as your improvements kind of get funded and you move along, this document can be revised and publicly noticed and address those real situations.
Right. All right, any further discussion? So, Mr. Barr, I assume we're going to be hearing more about this in our budget sessions.
Right.
Okay, good.
Yeah, well, timing is good, huh? Certainly is, yeah.
You want to stand? Yeah.
Yeah, I can work with Erica. I'm assuming you're working on some budget stuff.
Yes.
So we'll make sure it's in there and it's incorporated into whatever you're working with for that workshop.
Okay, very good.
I guess I just have one question on that is this going to be a burden? I mean, let's say the parks. Is that going to be a burden on the Parks and Rec budget, or is this Public Works, or how are we going to distribute the pain and suffering across the city?
One of the good sides of that you have two different funds here. You have facilities, which would usually come from your general fund, unless we have something in the pipeline, such as grants or funding for certain improvement projects. And then you have the curb ramps, which can be used by road funds, gas tax, Measure T, maybe an OBAG grant that we're not sure we're going to get yet from NVTA. And then we also have development going on, like Tainter and Oak Street right for now. The church is doing some upgrades. They're required to do some curb ramps. So a lot of the burden, I think, on the curb ramps, we can look at the city's already doing actively. We have TDA funds to do the curb ramps on Railroad Avenue. And we're doing the curb ramps on Allison and Charter with the overlay project. So we're hitting some of those big projects there with our funds already. It's going to be looking at the facility side and maybe our Measure D funds and allocating some of those general fund items into there.
Okay. Will be interesting budget discussions.
Right.
Measure D's already been spent 4 times.
I know. Thanks, Tobias.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Great work.
Thank you both very much. Appreciate the presentation. Absolutely. All right, that takes us to Ms. Mitz, agenda item 9.3.
Just waiting for it to come up. I want to go on record. I believe this is the longest staff report I've written to date, as well as the longest PowerPoint presentation.
How many hours did you put into it?
About 60. Between the staff report and the PowerPoint, it's about 60 staff hours that went into this.
Okay. I need to come over here again.
So I'll wait till everyone gets situated.
Thank you.
So again, this is a report to the City Council regarding the rate study. On January 17th, the City Council did request 4 items to be reviewed. The first was a review of the bond covenants. The second is a summary report on the major projects that were in the rate study, including funding assumptions for each project, an overview of the various financial mechanisms with details on cost assumptions, and then a review of the perceived inequity in allocation between user types between base rate and usage fee for the water and wastewater systems. So for our bond covenants, I'm going to tackle this one first. Currently within our water and wastewater system, we do have 3 bonds issued. We have a Series 2005B, which is strictly wastewater, and that's $2.2 million that's been spread over 25 years. When you see the series number, the 2005, 2006, 2012, those are the years that the bonds were issued. So you can kind of get an idea about how much we've paid on it already. For the Series 2006A, that is strictly water. It was almost $8.9 million, again for 25 years. And then the most recent bond series that was issued was 2012B, and this was a water and a wastewater bond. It was issued over 20 years. The water side is just about $5.6 million, and the wastewater side is $5.5 million. So in particular for the water system, for the bonds, for water, right now we have an outstanding principal balance of $11.1 million, and that is principal only. Each year we do make principal and interest payments on it. So there's additional money that we pay on the bonds. Right now our payments for principal and interest is approximately $1 million annually, and our final payment on all of our bonds ends in 2033. So that's the extension of how far out the 2012 bonds go. Our wastewater system, we have an outstanding principal balance of $3 million. We pay $250,000 annually towards that debt service with a final payment in 2033. As part of our bond covenants that we have in our bond agreements, I just want to do some clarification on what is a bond covenant, why do we keep talking about it, why is it important. The first part is any bond that we do have to sign an installment purchase agreement, and that was done as attachment A inside the staff report. Within the installment purchase agreement, it's about a 30-page document. And it is also inside our bond. I call it the big bond book. It's a book that's about an inch thick, that's available online. It's open. That's what public investors, that's what people look at to determine the worthiness of our bonds and our credit. But within the installment purchase agreement, they have definitions, the representations and warranties, acquisition of the project, installment payments, security, covenants of the participants. So when you hear us refer to bond covenants, that's the section it falls under. Prepayment of installation payments or installment payments, event of default and remedies, and I'll talk a little bit about some default that we have right now and some and the remedies that we've taken. The discharge of obligations, as well as they have a miscellaneous category in each installment agreement. So one of the components in the installment agreement is a bond covenant. So the bond covenant, the legal definition is it is a legally binding term of agreement between a bond issuer and the bond holder. And so the city is currently out of compliance with its bond covenants in regards to debt service. Within bond covenants, there's several things that we have to meet. The one that we are currently out of compliance with is our debt service. We do currently have a requirement that the city must have system net revenues equal to at least 1.2 or 120% of the annual debt service. So what does all that mean? The system net revenues, those are basically our system revenues minus our operations and maintenance costs. System revenues are defined as water, wastewater sales, the operating revenue, which consists of new connections as well as money received from damage to the system. For instance, a driver knocks over a fire hydrant and they reimburse us, or we might get some type of money in from an insurance company. Non-operating revenue, and I have been asked what is if transfers in from the general fund or other funds would be considered non-operating revenue. They are not. I've confirmed that with the bond counsel who currently holds the bonds, and outside bond counsel, two municipal financial consultants, as well as BLX who prepares our annual disclosures, and CPAs. So that has been 100% assured to me that transfers in from general fund does not cover, is not considered part of system revenues. The non-operating revenue is the sale of assets. So if we sell anything within our water or wastewater system, the money that we get on the sale would go into system revenues and interest income. So the second part of that is that covers the system revenues. Now we're going to look at the definition of operations and maintenance costs. They are defined as reasonable and necessary costs paid or incurred for maintaining and operating the system. So basically, day to day, what does it cost the city to operate the water, wastewater systems? It also includes expenses of management and repair and all other expenses necessary to maintain and preserve the system in good repair and working order. That's another good point of clarification. Is that we are mandated by our bond covenants that we have to keep our systems in good repair and working order. And as we can see from a lot of the breaks, the fixes, the things that have happened lately, it's not in good repair and working order. We're constantly putting fixes on it. It also covers all administrative costs charged directly or portioned to the operations of the system. And what that means is part of my salary, for instance, is because I do work not only for things relating to the general fund, I also do work for the water system as well as the wastewater system. So part of my salary as part of Erica's salary is that it's divided between the different systems. In addition, it's any other administrative costs for overhead for the maintenance of the buildings. So it's anything that's charged directly to the system. So what I want to take a look at now, this is a chart so you can kind of get an idea of how the bond covenants work when it comes to the debt service. So you'll see on the line item on the far left, and my apologies, there was a mistake in the staff report, so I'll point out where the mistake was. It wasn't in the numbers, it was just in the lines on the far right-hand side. So the first category, you'll see the revenues. These are taking our actual numbers from fiscal year 15-16 just for the water fund. So our water sales, we had about $4.1 million. Our other operating revenue is $172,000. So again, that's anyone hits something, we have to repair it to the system. If we have a meter replacement that somebody's paying for, that's what that is. We didn't have any non-operating revenue, and interest income is $45,000. So our total system revenues, which is line A, was $4.3 million for our water system for last year. Our operations and maintenance expenses was $4 million for fiscal year 15-16. So that will leave a system net revenues of $316,000. So you're taking your total system revenues, which is line A, minus your operating and maintenance expenses, which is line B, and that will give you what you have left over, basically. So that's how much we were operating in the positive for that particular year. So what they want to do is they look for that debt service ratio that you see of the 1.2 or 120%. That's the number that they're looking for as the base. And then next what they do is they take the debt service. So for the water system, you can see our debt service for 15-16 for both bonds combined was a little over $1 million. And that will give you line D. So the error that was in the staff report is on the debt service coverage. I had B divided by D. It actually should have been C divided by D. So you'll see your net system revenues of $316,000 divided by the $1 million in your debt service leaves us a debt coverage ratio of 0.32, where by our bond covenants it has to be 1.2. So
Can I ask you a quick question on the
Yes.
2012B?
Yep.
You indicated that bond was issued for both wastewater and water.
Yes.
Does this payment separate out the two? So this is just water?
That's just the
and
water
there's
payment.
Wastewater in a separate?
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe without having my bond book in front of me, my little bond Bible, I believe it was about 78% was for the water fund, and then 28% was for the wastewater fund, and it was based on the projects.
Thank you.
So next, if we look at our bond covenants, First, we have our debt service requirements through our bonds, which I just covered. In addition to that, there are financial limits in the amount of debt that is carried by an organization, and these are outlined by Standard & Poor's. And so basically, these limits show the extent which revenues are able to cover annual debt service requirements after operating costs have been paid for. It's very standard, and Standard & Poor's has set out an analytical characterizations for utilities specifically. And so here are the ratios that they show for utility systems. Again, you'll notice that same kind of rating scale, the 1.0, 1.25, 1.26. So Standard & Poor's, and this goes on the other side on how they rate us, is that their analytics go as strong as anything greater than 1.5, and that's where we really would like to be at. A good is between 1.26 and 1.5. Adequate is between 1.0 and 1.25, and insufficient is less than 1. So as you can see from the bonds that we have, bond covenants, they are satisfied with the adequate range. However, in order to borrow more money, we need to be in a stronger position than that. For fiscal year 14-15, 15-16 as well as 16-17, we are in that insufficient range. And when we did take the bonds out in 2012, just so you have an idea of where we were at, the water system in 2012 was at a 2.9 and the wastewater was at a 5.56. 2013, the water was at a 3.19 and wastewater was 4.5. And then from years 14, 15, 16, you start seeing it declining. The bond covenant ratios are done for the water and the wastewater systems. Wastewater system is stronger than the water system. However, when it comes to our bond covenants as well as S&P ratings, they take the weaker of the two systems, which is our water system. So here's just a review of the bond covenants that we have and where we're actually at. And I know we've heard on several occasions that we want to see the numbers. How much in cash are we actually talking about? So for fiscal year 15, this is for our water system. The first line you can see we're at 1.01, which means the S&P characterization we're adequate, but it means we're not meeting our bond covenants. The amount needed to meet our bond covenants would have been $1.2 million. So we fell short about $190,000 that year. Fiscal year 16, we're at 32%, which is insufficient. The amount needed for our bond covenants was $1.2 million, and we're short about almost $900,000. For fiscal year 17, the estimated, we're estimating we're going to be at 0.27, which is, again, insufficient. Our need is $1.18 million, which means that we were left $917,000 short. This includes the amounts that we're estimating for the rate increases. So even with the increases for fiscal year 17, we are still showing showing short, and that was also noted in our rate study. But it is showing that in fiscal year 18 and 19, that's when we get out of it, and we're to the 2.22 range and 2.5 range, which leads us as strong. One of the things to also remember is these numbers, even though they look large, if we have one major failure on any of our systems, it's going to cost us way more than $1 million or $1.5 million to fix. So those numbers can quickly change depending on what unforeseen circumstances may come up. So for our wastewater system, this again, it shows that we're definitely in stronger position. So for 15, we were actually over by 50,000, 51,000 in the following year. So we hovered right around that 50,000 mark. And then in fiscal year 18, you'll see the estimated is that 1 million is what we're over. And our bond rating would be S&P would be at a 5.17. And then the very next year, you can see for fiscal year 19, it goes down to a 2.07. But that is because that is a time frame that we're anticipating that we'll be able to get additional debt for the wastewater system for improvements to our facilities. And again, it's the same thing as we do have small systems. However, once they break, and if anything goes wrong, that a $1 million overage can quickly go away. So a review of our city's bond covenants, they do require us to set rates, fees, and charges that are at least 1.2 times the annual debt service. One of actually it was our saving grace with S&P as well as with our bond covenants, our continuous disclosure, is they have made notes on this, and everything that's put out for the public to view, it does state for 14-15, it was we don't meet our debt requirements. However, we are under contract with a rate consultant. For fiscal year 15-16, it says we don't meet our debt requirements. However, the City Council just passed a resolution approving the new rates, which will get them intact by fiscal year 18. So those are things that have really helped us not to get dinged too badly on it, and it is part of one of the corrective actions that we must take. The second part of our bond covenants is that the city cannot legally, according to our contract, reduce rates, fees, and charges unless those charges will at all times be sufficient to meet our bond covenants. So that's kind of the spot that we're at right now, is that we have raised our rates. Raising the rates put us in compliance with our bond covenants. And until we actually meet that bond covenant, that 1.2, we, by virtue of our contract, cannot lower rates. And so it's estimated right now would be the end of 2018.
And to be fair, the bond actually says currently implemented rates, right? When you're referring to reduction of rates,
yes,
it's the rates that are in place right now.
Correct. Another part of our bond covenant does require that we provide continuous disclosure of the city's financials. When you hear me refer to our dissemination agent, we do hire a company called BLX, and what they do is they review our city financials as far as our revenues, our expenses, our bond covenants, and they're the ones that actually produce the document that gets posted on EMMA, which is a municipal site for all bonds that are issued, and that's where, if people want to buy bonds, that's where they go to look at the information. And the continuous disclosure is basically a way for bondholders and rating agencies to analyze the financial health of the city. A city such as ours, with how our bond ratings, or how our debt covenant was going down, I believe on the thing on our disclosure posted on EMMA, it shows 5 years. So easily somebody who might want to look at the financial health of the city will look at that and see how we're declining. If we don't take corrective actions and they keep seeing it declining, that's going to be a red flag for them. And that's stuff those are things that I've talked to bond counsel, municipal financial advisors, our rate consultant. I've talked to numerous people just to get confirmation, and they said that is a big red flag. But once they see that we have passed rates to correct that issue, that gets us in better graces. So if people want to buy bonds or invest in the city, they'll be able to look at that and go, okay, they're financially and fiscally responsible. Another item within our bond covenants is if we are in default of the installment purchase agreement, the Security and Exchange Commission, so SEC, they have a rule that does require a voluntary event notice, non-payment related to default. So this notice is required to provide information on matters that an average prudent investor ought reasonably to be informed of before buying or selling a security. So this is something that we have to disclose to them. If anything happens with the rates where we decide to roll back the rates, that's not something I would recommend. But if that happens, we also have to disclose that for any future borrowing that we do. And when I talk to bond counsel as well as municipal financial advisors, they have both said that is not a good thing for a city to do in order to be able to secure more debt later on. So for this particular event notice, we did file it in 14-15. We filed it in 15-16, and based on our projections, we will be filing it in 16-17.
When do you file? The 16-17? What date?
It will be after the close of the fiscal year. It's typically, I think, by March 31st, but it's for the prior years. So or for the prior year financials. So what they'll do is they'll look at our financials at June 30th, 2017, and at that point, they look at that dollar amount, and then that's the part that they have to disclose. It doesn't matter what happens between June and between March of the next year. It's based on the prior year financials. But something like this with the rate review, and we did an increase in the rates, they would make a notation in there, and they'd say the projections for and kind of make accommodations and let the bondholders know. And because I have received calls from current bondholders wondering if we're going to default on our loans, and I have to assure them that financially we've taken the corrective actions. So being out of compliance with our bond covenants, these are things, again, when I pulled our current bond counsel for the current bonds, a prospective bond counsel to give us some guidance on what we could be doing on two municipal financial advisors, BLX. Every single one of them, I took notes on what they said, and I kind of came up with bullet points for everything they agreed on. The first is that it cannot be taken lightly. It's not something we can just go, we're out of compliance. Yeah, eventually we'll get there. We cannot take it lightly. It is something that the market focuses on. So while it looks like one piece of paper in a document, they will look at that. They'll see the downward trends, and if we don't take corrective actions, it's going to be harder for us to actually borrow money. It's typically the first indication of a financial problem, and again, if it's left unresolved, it's going to be harder for us to be able to borrow money, or if we do, it's going to be a much higher cost. It can cause red flags for investors, bond issuers, bond insurers, bond issuers, if it isn't remedied. These are the staff that I reached out to. So Aura, Carrington, and Sutcliffe, they're the current bond counsel for the bonds. Jones Hall, which is an independent bond counsel. BLX Group, who provides our continuous disclosures. Two separate municipal financial advisors, as well as Standard & Poor's. The potential consequences for noncompliance is, the first is our inability to incur additional debt. If we don't get in compliance, it is very likely that it's going to be hard for us to incur additional debt, which means every project would be cash financed at that point. It would, the ability to finance future projects will be challenged and more expensive.
Step back. Clarification there. The statements you're making are with respect to bonds and not state revolving loan funds, correct?
No, it will affect state revolving fund loans as well.
It will?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's on the next slide. State revolving fund loans, they also have similar bond covenants, or similar to bond covenants, they have debt service requirements. Theirs are a little bit lower than bonds. Bonds right now are 1.2. Theirs are 1.1 and 1.15. And when I talked to bond counsel for the current bonds, he said he actually reviews a lot of the lending packets for SRF for different state revolving fund loans, and he said that they are rejected unless you meet those bond covenants. So again, bonds can be downgraded, higher interest rates for borrowing, the inability or difficulty obtaining a municipal bond insurance policy. Bonds currently have insurance policies, so if for some reason you default on your bonds, monetarily default, they will come in and they make up and they pay the difference to make sure the bondholders still get their return. If we don't meet our bond covenants, municipal bonds, it's hard or impossible to get them insured. Obtaining new debt could become an issue due to fair security laws requiring full disclosure, which would include inability to meet current bond covenants. Kind of touched on that earlier. If for some reason the rates were reduced or anything happened, that's something that we would have to disclose, and it scares a lot of buyers on the market. State loans through SRF, as I just alluded to with with Paul is that they do also have debt service requirements, and if we're not meeting our current bond covenants, we'll be unable to borrow from them as well for the water wastewater systems. And then Standard & Poor's rating will be reduced. And this is a very extreme case on it. Everyone I talked to said they haven't seen this happen, but it's something that it's in our installment purchase agreement that it can happen, is that the insurers may call an event to default, and what this would do, it would accelerate the debt, and it would force the rates to ensure compliance with the bond covenants. So worst case scenario is if we say, okay, roll back the rates, we don't want to be in compliance with our bond covenants, they can actually force us to raise the rates. And that would be worst case scenario. Again, bond counsel I talked to said they've never seen that happen, but it's because everyone makes an effort to get in compliance with their bond covenants. So here's a summary, quick 3 bullet points. We're currently out of compliance with our bond covenants. Reducing the current rates is not possible until the 1.2 debt service ratio is met, and being out of compliance is serious and will hurt the ability of the city to borrow future projects. So the next item the city asked me to report back on are major projects, including funding assumptions. So first I want to talk about how is it decided what is paid for debt versus cash, because that kind of it seems to be a topic that people are trying to figure out, why are we only debt financing a certain portion, why are we cash financing? The first thing that is taken into consideration is who does it benefit? Does it benefit current customers, future customers, and both? If it benefits current customers, the rate should reflect that, where the current customers pay for what they're using in the water, the wastewater system. If it's for future customers, that's something that you might want to debt finance further out, so it spans over a few generations. Or if it's both, it can be a combination of our projections do show that we are using some impact fees. So certain things where developers have paid money because it's customers, future customers that are going to be coming in that help pay for it. The second thing that you want to look at in determining if it's debt or cash is what is the lifespan of the project. If it's, let's say it's some repair that you're doing to, I can't say exactly what the facilities are, but some repair you're doing, there's a 5-year life for that project. You're not going to debt finance a 5-year, something that only has a life of 5 years, you're not going to debt finance it for 30 years. Because that means you're taking what is used here and now for 5 years, and you're making someone pay for it 30 years down the line. So that's not something you would debt finance. If it's something, and you'll see in the wastewater, it's a wastewater treatment plant upgrades, which I believe is just about $8 million, I think someplace around there. That is something we would debt finance because that benefits current customers and future customers, and you'd want the current and the future customer to pay their fair share. The next is you'd have to look at how much debt actually can be borrowed. This goes back to our S&P analytics as well as the bond covenants. How much can we actually borrow based on how much we're taking in? And then the final component is what are the project characteristics that support the use of debt? Currently, the city does not have a debt policy. That is something that our auditors in last year in their report that we do need to work on. We just have not had the opportunity. These are things that are typically defined in a debt policy, so it's very black and white what you can and cannot borrow debt for or what are your limits. But unfortunately, until we have that, I'm going off of best practices. So GFOA is the Government Finance Officers Association. They are the go-to. They do have a financial policies book. And within the book, it does state that a project may have specific characteristics that support debt usage. A project that represents a one-time investment, such as construction of a new facility or the major upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant, is usually considered more appropriate use of debt than a project addressing an ongoing need, which would be like the maintenance of the facility. So in using the wastewater treatment plant, because I think that's one of the largest projects coming up, to actually fund the upgrades to the plant of that $7.8 million, $7.9 million, it would be appropriate to use debt because the lifespan of that is going to go out 20, 30, maybe 40 years, if not longer than that. However, any ongoing maintenance to that facility, let's say, something breaks, we need to fix it, it's just the normal wear and tear of the facility, that's not something that you would typically debt finance because that's just considered the wear and tear on the system by the current customers. So I want you to keep especially that definition in mind when we go over all the different major projects. So for the water system, currently we have identified $22.6 million in capital improvement projects, or so it's CIPs. This is over the next 10 years. The total amount to be funded is $17.7 million. So we already have some grants, impact fees, certain things. A big portion of this is the Upper York Creek Dam, which I believe we have about $4.5 million in grants and current debt that we're just going to draw down for this. So that's why there's a discrepancy in that number between the 22.6 and the 17.7. If you look at future dollars, because obviously we're not going to do all these projects in 1 year. If we were to do them all in 1 year, yes, that $17.7 million would hold. However, since it's projected out over 10 years, for both the water and the wastewater systems, they did a cost escalator of 3.1% each year. So when you see the term future dollars, it means that the price escalator going out over 10 years with a 3.1 increase every year, that's what the projects are ending up going to cost us after a 10-year period. Out of the projects that have been identified, $18.8 million, again in future dollars, is for the benefit of current customers, and only $2 million partially benefits future customers. I'm not going to bore you and read through the entire list, but they're all in the staff report as well as in the PowerPoint presentation. So you'll see on the left-hand side are the CIP projects. The next column, you'll see the timeline. That is in the report by Hansford Economic Consulting. For the water system, it's table A.A-7. For the wastewater system, it's table A-8. So you'll see the timelines. We're not starting everything at once. It's definitely strung out over 10 years. And then you'll see in the next column is the total estimated cost. So again, if we look at the York Creek Upper Dam removal, you'll see the estimated cost is $6.1 million. Where you see existing outside funding, that's where other funding sources have already been identified. For Upper York Creek, it is additional debt bond drawdown for bonds that we already have, part of the 2012 bonds, as well as current grants. And then you'll see the new rates funding. So that indicates what are the new rates funding, how much of each of these projects. So you'll see a lot of these items. So Upper York Creek and Meadowood tank upgrades, the bulk of them are actually for debt financed as well as through grants. And then you'll see the other things, again, keeping in mind the definition of what you typically would debt finance versus cash finance. Improvements, valve repair, valve replacement, ongoing maintenance for most of these systems.
Does a Meadowood tank specifically just benefit that geographic area?
And I'll get clarification. I don't believe we have any tanks that are actually benefiting just one geographical area. I believe that water is pulled from all the reservoirs of tanks. I will defer to Erica.
Yes.
I'd have to get confirmation on that myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there are two.
I know that was a discussion that we had during the rate study that all the tanks fed into the whole system, so it wasn't that one tank just benefited the area that it was in.
Okay.
So,
That was my understanding, so I'm glad you heard that too.
With respect to the funding sources, are the use of potential impact fees folded into these?
Yes.
On what line would they be in? Outside funding?
Some of it is an existing outside funding, and then I will have to verify the charts. It's either in chart A6 or A8 in the water system, where it says new rates funding, there's a certain percentage that's impact fees, and I want to say it's about $1 million for water and maybe $1 million for wastewater. I'll really have to verify, but impact fees are taken into consideration.
I just have one more question
Sure.
on this. Do the estimated costs include construction management for somebody to be doing this, or is that on top of this?
For example, the ones that I know of, the York Creek Upper Dam does include contingency total project cost on there. The majority of them, if not all of them, do include those kind of costs, the total project cost.
I guess I'm going to, would we actually have somebody, we'd hire somebody to do the project, and there would be a construction management fee built in, is what I'm thinking.
Correct.
So they all have that.
They typically, from what I've been seeing, that they're all total project roll-up. The estimating, the contingency, construction management, design, preliminary engineering, environmental, and permitting.
I've got a question on one of the items up there. It's the Dwyer Road booster improvements. One of the questions I have is, we purchase water from Napa. Does it come directly to us and then we ship it out, or does it cut off the line directly to our water customers south of town?
I'm going to defer to Erica on this. She's our engineer. I just crunch the numbers.
I mean, if it's the right time to ask that question. If not, we can get into it later. It's a question I've been wondering. Is does the water come all the way to Napa to us and then out, or does it spur off along the line? But we can look into that later.
It depends where the water is coming from, because water that's coming up from Jameson Canyon goes through the Dwyer, would go through the Dwyer station. Water that's coming from Lake Hennessy, I don't believe will, but I'm not clear on that. But in any event, there may be a difference depending upon the source of the Napa water. This Dwyer Road Booster Improvement is a joint project, as I recall it, involving the City of Napa, City of St. Helena, and the City of Calistoga, and a benefit of it is to improve the pressures in our system, particularly on the south side, from Rutherford up. And it may have some water quality impacts as well, as it pushes the water through more quickly. But again, an engineer needs to speak to this more precisely than I can.
Okay, so I'll go to the next slide. Again, it's same format. Well, you'll see the CIP projects, the timelines, the existing outside funding, assume financing that we're going to be doing. And then on this I think this is the last page, you'll see there's certain projects where it spans over a couple of years. So, for instance, the Bell Canyon intake replacement, you'll see it's 2017, 2018. The total cost is $2 million. That $2 million is split between the years. So I didn't want anyone to have a misconception that it's $2 million in 17, $2 million in 18. That's the total estimated cost. And then here's another example of that. Like for the replaced water mains, the timeline is starting in 2021. It's ending in 2027. It's not $4 million each year. It's $4 million divided by each of those years. And then here's just a summary for the water system. So the total estimated cost is the $22.5 million. Existing outside funding is the $4.8 million. The new rates are funding $17.7 million, and then out of that, assumed financing is $2.2 million. So for the wastewater system, you'll see a similar format. So identified costs for CIPs is $15.4 million over the next 10 years. $15.4 million is the total amount that that it's going to cost. $17.7 million in future dollars. Out of that $17.7 million, $17.6 million it benefits current customers, and only $100,000 benefits future customers. Again, this is the same. The project list for the wastewater fund. Again, this is referenced in Table A8 in the wastewater technical memorandum. So you'll see, again, the miscellaneous maintenance projects. So that's from 2017 to 2027. So that's just ongoing maintenance just to take care of our systems. And then you'll see our water system. That is the one that we're actually looking at doing substantial borrowing for. The first is for Phase 1 for the wastewater treatment plant. So it's $7.5 million that we're looking to borrow for that. And then the last part is the Phase 2 for the wastewater treatment plant, which is another $400,000. So you'll see out of the total estimated cost of $15,000, $7.8 million of it, or sorry, $15 million. I wish it was only $15,000. That would be great. Assume financing for well over half of it. So $7.8, almost $7.9 million that we're going to be financing for the wastewater system. So next, I want to move on to the third item that we were tasked with was an overview of the various financial mechanisms with details on cost assumptions. So cost assumptions, they're basically estimates. These are our best estimates that we could come up with on how much these particular CIP projects were going to cost. Engineers' estimates are used for projects where preliminary engineering has been completed already, so that's something that at least gives us a good solid idea. Where work has not started, cost assumptions or cost estimates are based on typical costs for similar projects of other agencies. So at that part, our public works staff, they'll reach out to other agencies, they'll look at what other projects have been completed, they'll work with consultants just to get a general idea of, okay, Maybe Calistoga spent $5 million on it. That was 10 years ago. Prices are escalating. We're estimating it's going to be $10,000. So it really is our best estimate on what's been done around us. In addition, the city had retained GHD to provide cost assumptions for some of the projects not started, and I believe that was for water projects only or wastewater? Wastewater projects. So we did retain a firm to help us with some of those cost assumptions. Again, the estimates are expected to vary as work begins on the projects. We can't stress enough that these are estimates. Once work actually starts to be done on a project, the first thing that we have to do is develop the scope of work. Once the scope of work is developed, the engineering designs are prepared, and then construction bids are received. So all these are factors that can either increase or decrease costs. A perfect example of a cost assumption is just that, it's an assumption. Reclamation field improvements, if you look at the CIP budget, in the CIP that was included in the rate study, it said we were going to spend about $142,000. And this was based on input from our city's wastewater plant operator, as well as material supplier. So they said, hey, we need to upgrade this. Let's look at it. How much is it going to cost? So the initial estimates were about $142,000. The actual on this is about $1.5 million. So you can see how much they actually can vary. And the $1.5 million, this is on the high end after talking to our Public Works Director. We are hoping that it might be closer to the $1 million mark, but you can see still the estimates can vary dramatically. And the reason this one changed so much is when we actually got in there, started doing the scope of work, we found that the condition of the existing system wasn't what we thought it was. So you start digging deep, you start looking at the pipes. It was in worse condition than we expected. We are expanding the scope to replace more piping, as well as the installation for additional sprinklers to achieve increased coverage, and part of that is due to regulatory requirements.
I've got another good example just based on history.
Perfect.
Because I remember this one pretty vividly, which was that in 2010, we estimated that the cost of Tank 1A up at Bell Canyon would be $1,050,000. It ended up costing close to $2 million. There was a negotiation, I think, that brought it down to maybe $1.7, $1.8 million. But and that's a completed project at this point. But there you are on a tank, and you're off by almost 100%, not quite 100%, but that's what can happen to you. Do you remember that, Peter?
I remember it vividly.
Yeah, okay.
So did want to point out that after speaking with our Public Works Director, the staff does believe that most of the cost estimates that were in the rate study are low, and when the actual construction costs begin, it will be much higher. So that's just something to keep into consideration, especially when you look at how much we're trying to build reserves. We can quickly see a lot of those reserves going away. This is a key reason why additional monies are set aside in the reserves to address this, as well as unanticipated expenses due to unplanned projects. Some specific examples that just came up is last week we had a water main break on Crane. We couldn't project it. We didn't know it was going to happen. It happened. That ended up costing us additional money and resources that we weren't expecting. Processed chemicals for the wastewater treatment plant is another good example. Typically in a year, we spend $25,000 on ascorbic acid, and that is used to treat the water that goes out of the wastewater treatment plant and is discharged. That's typical. That's what we budgeted for this fiscal year. Our actual, because of the rain and because of how much more water we've had to discharge from our ponds, is about $125,000. So again, those are expenses that we can't anticipate, and so that's why we set aside the reserves to anticipate those. There's two other ones Eric and I just talked about today, and they're quickly slipping my mind.
One of them is some repairs to the Pond 5, which is next to the discharge pond, and we have a small leak. We have to investigate it, and we've had GHD look at it, and we could be looking at $50,000 to repair it. We could look at $100,000, depends on how in depth the repair is out there, and that'd be later this spring when it dries out. So. Just one item. The other one I can't slip my mind out there.
I know.
Oh, the motor. Yeah, Monday morning I came in, and a motor, we had just replaced a backup motor last summer, and the main motor, they call it the Muffin Monster, crashed, and that's about a $30,000 piece of machinery with trading in the old one for rebuild.
Right. And I mean, I can think of another one too, because I've received calls relating to the infill and inflow and infiltration in the Cronulla area, where during the rainstorms, 2 of the sewer covers came off, and obviously that's going to need to be investigated and looked at.
I do have some good news there. We're going to try to work with Calistoga, who has a smoke machine, and they're going to help us smoke the pipes there and see if we have inflow from gutters and or if we have some serious groundwater infiltration. And you'll see when the smoke comes up literally out of the asphalt and or someone's gutters, where we have the inflow problems, because that definitely is an issue up there. But I've been told we're doing pretty good overall for our city. We're not at 5 to 10 times over with our I&I down at our system, whereas look at Napa Sand and the park debacle they had in the last rainstorm.
Right. Good.
So again, some additional information on our the debt and the cost assumptions. So for our water system, we are looking at taking on an additional $2.7 million in new debt, and this will be to pay for the Bell Canyon intake tower replacement as well as pump station upgrades. So the total debt service for the water fund will then equal $13.8 million, and again, that's just our principal. That does not include the interest that we also pay on top of that. We will have about $1.1 million annually in debt service for the water system. And to achieve the 1.2 ratio, we have to have a net system revenues of $1.3 million. So again, this is your revenues less your expenses, has to be at least $1.3 million based on this the new debt service. For our wastewater system, we are looking at taking in about $7.9 million of additional debt. It is both for the Phase 1 and Phase 2 upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant. So our total debt service for the wastewater fund will then be at $10.9 million. So in the wastewater fund, you're looking at our previous payment was about $250,000, and now we're going to be up to about $880,000 annually in debt service. Again, that 1.2 ratio is $1.1 million of net system revenues. So the next I just wanted to touch on under the same category is our cash flow. We do anticipate that the city will meet its 2012B debt service coverage of at least 120% by the end of fiscal year 18, so that's good news for the city. We may be able to designate up to $3.1 million per year to the water fund by fiscal year 27, and that will just go to the reserves to handle those things that come up. We also may be able to designate up to $2.7 million in the wastewater fund by fiscal year 27. And these funds, again, are designated for system rehabilitation, random things that happen, just maintenance that we have to do, that's really brought on by the wear and tear by the existing customers. So it's stuff that's going out of our system and in our system used by our current customers. We have to maintain it. And I think in my staff report, I use the analogy of having a car. You have the wear and tear on the car, you have to get things repaired on it, and that's for the existing car owner. Our cash flow, I feel like it's an optimistic cash flow projections, just knowing how many things have been going wrong and could potentially keep breaking on us. Situations which could diminish the cash flow is infrastructure failure, new regulatory requirements, higher than projected project costs, as well as unanticipated projects. So the final section that was asked at the January 17th meeting was a review of the perceived inequity in allocation between user types and between base rate and usage rates. Verbatim. So basically, this is what are the customers charged for? For both the water and the wastewater systems, there's a base rate or a service charge, and this is a fixed rate. So this does not change month to month. This is based on what the pipes cost, what the meters cost, what the maintenance of the system costs. That's what determines what the base rate is. The second part of what customers are charged for is a use rate or a commodity rate. This does vary month to month, and the charge is based on the amount of water used. So for the water system, it's the amount of water that flows through that meter and that meter registered. For wastewater, it is based on the winter average of your water use. Typically, there's more water used during the summertime. However, it's primarily for irrigation. So instead of charging customers for all the water that they use during the summer months on the wastewater side on that system, a lot of the water is used for landscaping, basically seeps into the ground, so it never hits our sewer system. So that's why we use the winter average. So determining the base rates for the water, there are 3 sections to the base rate. The first is the customer cost. So this is the revenue requirement divided by the number of meters. So basically, how much money does it cost to maintain our current system? So what we do is we take that dollar amount and we divide it by the total number of meters that we have in the city, or city and outside of city limits that service our customers. So we have 2,452 meters. So you take that total revenue requirement for the customer cost, divide it by the 2452, and you get a customer cost of $17.69 per month. So this is across the board, everyone pays that dollar amount. And that's what it costs to have the meter installed in your property, have the pipes, have everything. That's what it costs. The second section.
Charge them for a meter.
Yes, we do. If we have to do a meter replacement, we do charge them for the meter replacement, and that's if it's due to negligence on their part. If it's a typical wear and tear on the system, the city actually does pay for the meter, and that's the third component of the base rates. So the second component of the water-based rates are capacity costs. So this is allocated to customers based on the hydraulic capacity of the meter size. I got this from some engineers. The meter ratio and the meter flow figures, they're based on the American Water Works Association. So it's AWWA, it's their standards. So they basically look at meters from 5/8, 3/4, 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch. The largest we have is 6 inch. So they basically measure how much water can go through a 6-inch pipe and what duration of time. So to simply put, the larger the meter, the more the water flow, the larger the meter ratio is. That's my simple math. Next component of the capacity costs is that the largest number of meters in St. Helena are the 5/8 and 1-inch single-family meters. So out of the 2,400 meters that we have in the city, over 1,900, almost 2,000 of them, are for single-family homes. So 5/8 inch, 1-inch meters. So that is our largest customer within the city of St. Helena. They account for about 81% of all of our meters. There are several meters not included which serve multiple units. For instance, apartment complexes, mobile homes, they might have 1 meter going into their property. However, they serve maybe 10 units. So that's not included in that number. So if we look at capacity costs, I'm looking at the monthly service charge. It varies dependent on the meter size. The rate study has everything broken down up to, they include 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, up to 6 inch. For the sake of space on this PowerPoint, I just did 3 categories. So I did a single family up to 1 inch, a non-residential 1-inch meter, and then a 6-inch. So you can see the monthly cost varies dramatically between those because it's based on how much water can flow into the home from that size meter. So a single-family residence up to 1 inch has a monthly cost of $24.22. And again, this is just for capacity costs. A non-residential 1-inch is $60.55, and a 6-inch meter is $1,211. So you can see there's a difference. The capacity costs are then added to the customer cost, and that will get what your base rate is. And then it also adds the third component, which is meter replacement. So this gives you a full view of these 3 different scenarios. So you can see a single family up to 1 inch is $17.69 a month. That's the customer cost for everybody. Capacity costs for single family are $24, non-residential $60, and a 6-inch is $1,200. Meter replacement, again, it's dependent on the size. The larger the meter, the more expensive it is. And so the meter replacement, typical meters last 20 years. So right now we are doing annually 5% a year that we're replacing. And so what we do is we break that fee down into a monthly charge. And so here you can see the total monthly cost for a single family up to a 1-inch meter is $43.22 a month. Non-residential is $80 a month, and then a 6-inch is $1,252 a month. So you can definitely see in determining the base rates that a single family is a lot lower than a 6-inch meter, which is going to be more of your industrial and bigger customers. So just a synopsis on the base rates, the larger the meter, the more water can flow through, and the greater cost for the city to maintain that particular meter. So So in determining the use rates, this is determined by taking the total cost allocated to use charges and dividing them by the projected water demand for the peak and off-peak season. It is a lot simpler for the water system as opposed to the wastewater system. And what this is done to determine the cost per 100 cubic feet, or that should say HCF instead of HRF. So here you can see the breakdown between the peak and off-peak. And again, this is for the rates for fiscal year 17 that we just adopted. So they will vary depending on when the price increases incur, but I needed some type of base to at least show. So you can see during the peak period, 405 HFC or HCF? 100 cubic feet, HCF. Sorry, completely messed that one up. My apologies. There are several mistakes in this PowerPoint. Yes, exactly. So basically, during the peak period, we consume 63% of all the water. And so that comes out to a $5.50 charge per HCF. See, I got it right someplace. Off-peak, we only conserve $240,000, so 37% is consumed during off-peak. So therefore, the rate is increased to $6.11, so that will actually offset the amount that we need to take in to meet our revenue requirements. The use charge for HCF, it does not vary by meter size or by customer category because you're still paying for the exact same amount of water coming in and out. So for the water side, again, it is much easier to determine the HFC because it's just based on how much water is coming into your home, your business, your winery, your hotel. So now I'm going to move over to the wastewater side, which is a little more complicated. We do have 3 different types of base fees for our wastewater side. The first is residential, single-family, multifamily, and mobile homes. They are charged a flat monthly charge per housing unit, so that is what their base fee is. Schools are charged a flat monthly charge per student. And non-residential is a flat monthly charge by customer type, and I'll go into a little bit later the customer types and what that means. The base fee is allocated based on the flow and strength customer characteristics. I'll go into a little bit in detail. We'll get into biological oxygen demand and some other fancy
biochemical.
Thank you. See, fancy words. But basically, it's the strength of the wastewater that's going into the system that's then going into our treatment plants and is going. So it's basically the strength of the waste that's going into the system. So the use or the flow rate is charged to all customers for wastewater based, and it's based on the winter average of the water meter reads, which I've already covered. There are 4 steps used to determine how the wastewater rates are calculated so that the monthly wastewater rates meet legal requirements for base and use charges. For wastewater, I'm combining base and use rates because they're a little more complicated than the water system, and the 4 steps they talk about the base and the use. So the first step is to establish wastewater customer base and user characteristics. So you'll see the customer base below. So the first thing we're going to do look at the customer base. So we have residential, schools, car wash, religious places, community centers, commercials, grocery, and mortuary. I don't know why mortuary is classed in there because it seems like a weird combination, but it is. Those are standards. Laundry, motel without food, motel with food, mixed retail with food, restaurant, Napa Valley College, service station, winery production non-treated, and winery production pre-treated. We currently have one winery that did actually install the systems, and they pre-treat all their waste before it goes into the city system, so that's why there's a differentiation. So that's the first part of the first step, is determining what the customer base is. The second is to look at the user characteristics. So this is what type of waste is being put through the system by the customer base. So wastewater or sewer strength is based on industry standards, and it's a combination of biological oxygen demand, or BOD, and total suspended solids, or TSS or SS. So that is what is basically used in determining, when you look at the customer category, what types of things might they be flushing down their toilets, might they be putting down the drains, what are things that they put into our wastewater system, and the BOD and the TSS or the SS, that's going to determine on how much their base and their use fee is. So again, BOD and TSS is measured on how strong is the waste that is traveling through the city's wastewater system. The stronger the waste, the bigger demand on the city's wastewater system, and the higher amount to be paid by that particular customer. So again, that's going to be our restaurants, our wineries that don't pre-treat, our motels with food, certain categories that end up putting more stuff through our wastewater system that we have to treat. So the second step, so that's the first step, just determining the customer base and the user characteristics. The second step is to project the revenue requirements and allocate the requirements to collection and treatment. So in looking at how much it costs to run our treatment plant as well as our collection plant, 72% of the revenue requirements, that money is allocated towards treatment, and 28% is allocated towards collection. So obviously it's a lot cheaper to collect it than it is to treat it. So that's why you'll see the difference in the percentages. The third step that we need to take in determining the base and use rates for wastewater is allocate the revenue requirements based on flow and strength to determine the unit costs. So this determines how much we charge each customer category per unit. The percentage distribution of operations, so again, it's the treatment versus collection, and it's also the maintenance of operations attributed to flow, BOD, and TSS. So how much maintenance do we have to do on our systems that can be directly attributed to BOD and TSS? And the fourth and final component step in determining the wastewater rates is determining the revenue requirement by customer costs. So per unit costs are multiplied by the flow and strength characteristics of each customer category to determine the annual cost by customer type. So again, the more strain it has on the system, the more expensive it is going to be for that particular customer type. So the more flow, BOD, and TSS, the greater amounts required of the system and the greater cost it's going to be to the user. So if we look at the wastewater systems, residentials currently compose, they pay for 69% of the total cost of the system. Schools are 1%, and non-residential is 30% of the cost. The treatment cost per 100 cubic foot, or HCF, it's greatest for the high-strength customers such as winery productions who do not pre-treat restaurants and groceries and mortuaries, and it's lowest for customers such as car washes and religious places or community centers because they don't use it on a day-to-day basis, or what they use, for instance, car washes are recycled. So there's certain characteristics on why it's going to be low for those types of customers. So if we look at the difference in cost to treat high and low strength customers, it can be seen in the difference in the base and the use rate for the systems. So for instance, I just took three. There's several customer categories, but you'll see for a single family home for wastewater systems, the base rate is $48.04. The use fee is $4.69 per HCF. If you look at a restaurant, the base fee is $840.03. The HCF is $10.18. And if you look at a winery that's non-treated, it's $989.21. And then per HSC is $17.31. So here you can definitely see that there is a big difference in how much a single-family user pays as compared to somebody who does tax our wastewater system more than a single-family home might do, and up to $1,000 a month, just in a base fee. According to that chart, high-strength customers do pay approximately 20 times more in base fees and approximately 3 times more in HCF than a single-family home. So you can definitely see that the higher-use customers pay a lot more for use of the wastewater system. So I want to talk a little bit about who uses the city's water and wastewater systems. So currently we have 2,600 connections for our water system, and that includes 2,900 residential units. So again, we have 2,600 meters. Within some of those meters, you have multifamily mobile homes. For instance, Vineyard Valley, they have 2 meters, but there's 212 units within there. So we do service 2,900 residential units. 260 non-residential units, which are businesses, schools, religious places, 20 industrial, 30 irrigation-only customers. For residential connections are 87% of the total customer base, but they use 50% of the water deliveries, so about half of the water deliveries for the system. Industrial customers use 1% of the customer base and 21% of the water deliveries. So you can see that the industrial customers do use 21% of our water. If you look at wastewater, the residential, the flow coming out of the residents into our system accounts for 75% of the flow. Commercial is 20% of the flow. Industrial is 1% of the flow, and other customers are 4% of the flow. And I do want to point out, because residential on here says 75%, and you'll see 50% on the slide before it. The difference is between the water and the wastewater is several of the wineries and businesses are on septic systems and not using the wastewater system. So that's what the difference is. We do have several wineries and businesses. They have septic, so everything's treated on site. It never even hits our system. So that's why the residential water flow accounts for 75%, where the water use is only 50%. So an average amount paid annually per customer class. I wanted to finish up with this slide as far as hitting on the 4 points that the council directed on January 17th. So you'll see an average. So I broke it down into the 4 main categories, and we have our other category. So you have residential, industrial, hotel, spa, and commercial. So what I did was I took the total dollar amount collected for that particular category, divided it by the number of users within that category, and then we get a total annual amount paid per customer. So this is an average. So you see for water, wastewater, total annual paid for residential is $2,000 per residential unit. For industrial, it's $56,000 per user. Hotel spa is $41,000 per user. Commercial is about $6,700, almost $6,800 per user. So you can see out of all the different classes, and we talk about how much taxes, what type of solids or what type of materials go through our wastewater systems. You can see that industrial, hotel, spa, people that actually put more demand on our system pay a lot more than someone typically in a residential household. So the next item that I wanted to present tonight was additional information from the February 14th Council directive. So during the February 14th meeting, Council did direct to retain public sector financial consultant, as well as retaining bond counsel, retaining Catherine Hansford, and also forming an ad hoc committee to work with the 3 categories above and perform further analysis on the rate study as far as some of the cost assumptions, perceived inequities, basically the 4 categories that we just covered. The direct costs, in order to do this, to make you aware, is to retain a public sector financial consultant. Again, this is a temporary, meet with them for a couple months with the ad hoc committee. They gave me a not to exceed $5,000. Retain bond counsel, again, not to exceed $5,000. And then to retain Hansford Consulting, it would be additional almost $33,000 to retain her. Her initial contract was $63,000 total. So a lot of the financial calculations that she does have to do, it does involve redoing big portions of the rate study. So that's why the costs are high to retain her to continue in this endeavor. The fiscal impact total would be $43,000. It would be split between the water net position and wastewater net position, so it'd be taking $21,500 from the reserves from both of those accounts. The recommended action tonight is the first is to file and receive the report I just presented, and the next would be to provide staff direction on the retention of the financial advisor, bond counsel, Hansford Economic Consulting, and if we are directed to do so, it would be approving a resolution authorizing the use of the water and the wastewater reserves for $43,000 split equally, as well as approving a resolution approving a contract amendment with Catherine Hansford to provide additional technical support. And that is, I got through all 72 pages.
Thank you very much. It's a very detailed report. I'm sorry that more of our constituents aren't here to listen to it, but we are where we are. Are there any initial questions of Ms. Metz before I open up the public hearing?
Who are the other 2 companies? I know obviously Hansford, but the bond counsel and the municipal financial consultant?
Oh, Jones Hall is a municipal financial consultant, and then the bond counsel, and the municipal financial consultant I would recommend would be Del Rio Advisors. It'd be Ken.
Thank you.
I have a question. It says we have 20 industrial connections. I'm wondering, does that include customers from outside of town?
Yes.
Yes, that would.
So, to my knowledge, we have contracts with a number of wineries outside of town. I believe there's more than 20. 21?
Well, they're not all in town.
Okay.
21 wineries.
That we have contracts with.
I would have to verify that. I don't have the numbers
Okay.
off the top of my head. And as far as I would have to dig into the rate study to determine where wineries were classified, if they were classified under commercial or if they were industrial. I don't know.
Okay. That's a question that I've had. So,
All right, any further preliminary questions? Let me open the public hearing. Does anybody wish to speak at the public hearing?
I just have a question. I mean, this is an enormous amount of information to digest. So is the ad hoc committee going to be the next place where the public could weigh in on some of these after the public has had time to study it and digest it? Or when will the next time be available for any public input for this stuff?
Well, certainly the ad hoc committee is going to be governed by the Brown Act, and there'll be opportunity for public input, for sure.
So that's the only venue for that, or will there be more venue here?
I'm not sure that will be the only venue for that. Whether we run a workshop or not, we may well do it. I thought I had heard that there was going to be a workshop run on the wastewater side at one point.
Correct, March 29th.
March 29th. So, half of what's at issue here is on the wastewater side. So,
The wastewater one's
March 29.
Yeah, I heard that, yeah.
Mark it down.
6:30 to 8:30, tentatively at the fire station. I'll have more updates,
Yeah,
and we're going to try to do a
thank
billing insert with utilities.
Okay, thanks. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Tom Bell, Hillview Place. A couple of questions. It was about the third to the last slide where you talked about January 17, 2017, users of the city water and wastewater systems. That is using the amount of rates that were prior to our most recent rate increase.
Let's see if we can put the...
Page 68?
It's on page 34 of my...
Page 64, Mr.
I have page 34 on my handout.
All right.
Yes. Are those using the current water rates that we have now, or are they from 2016?
If I may answer, those are from the audited financials from 14-15.
Okay, so they don't really reflect the. Is there any way of reflecting what with the rate increases the way they are proposed, what those figures might be in say 2021 to get a better idea of what the annual paid per customer class will be?
If I may answer, we can run those projections. It will just take some time to do it because we would have to look at what bills. Actually, we would have to run it almost individually, so it would take quite some time. It is possible, but it would take many, many man-hours to do.
Well, the only reason I bring this up is because part of the concerns on the part of the community has been the rate increases over the next 5 years for the residents. Mm-hmm. When you're looking at the rate increases for some of the other customers, is in some cases it goes down, and in others it doesn't go up anywhere near as much as with the residents. And I'm wondering if this was projected in say over the next 3 to 5 years, it might show a different picture altogether. Just a comment I'd like to make. And the second one is, for some reason, I've been to quite a few of these meetings. When we were talking about the rate study, I thought we talked about a 0.7 differential between 1.2 and 0.7, and now, according to what I've heard this evening, it's 0.32 instead of 0.7.
Yeah, the water situation's deteriorated badly.
It's even gone.
It's deteriorated badly, and quite frankly, this should be no real surprise. There was a story in the Register the other day about the Napa system and the huge hit they've taken through reduction in water revenues. So it's not unique to us.
Okay. Well,
It's just that 6 months ago, we were told it was 0.7, and now it's 0.3. So
different fiscal years.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any further?
Thank you.
Any further public comment? All right, let me close public comment, and I think the issue before us is the direction with respect to bond counsel, financial advisor, Hansford, the costs associated with that. I did not vote for going down this path, nor did the vice mayor, but the council as a whole did vote for going down this path, and I think my position is that if we're going down this path and we have a committee, we need a strong committee, and it needs to be well supported with consultants. And then it also seems to me at some point we're going to have to provide a little further direction to the committee itself as to what it is that we actually want the committee to look at. And in particular, for example, I would not want the committee to be instructing Ms. Hansford to run scenarios that, in her professional judgment, do not comport with the San Juan Capistrano case. That's just a waste of time, money, and could chew up a lot of consultant time. So, we're going to need a further discussion. I'm not saying this is the evening for it here, but with respect to the staff recommendation, given the majority view of the council, it seems to me a reasonable one, and I, as one who was talked out of it, would support it.
Well, I tend to think the amounts for the other two consultants are probably low. I don't see Ms. Hansford coming into this until about midway through. It's kind of too early for her to be doing anything till we look at issues like the revenue requirements and those things. And I would find it really strange if $5,000 would cover a couple of meetings for each of those two consultants. So I have a concern that we're not budgeting enough there. I can see if you get to the point where you are going to recommend new rates, she has to rewrite her study, and obviously her numbers seem in line, but we seem a little miserly on the others.
If I may interject, the cost assumptions, when I did talk to the bond counsel and the financial advisors, I forwarded the motion that was made at the February 14th meeting to them, so that was based off of how much they thought their hourly rate multiplied by. In my opinion, I believe Catherine should be there since the beginning. At the beginning, when we were working on the ad hoc committee trying to determine dates, if we need bond counsel and a financial advisor to work with Catherine and with an ad hoc committee, I think it's very important that Catherine's there to be able to explain why she made certain assumptions or why assumptions are there. So in my opinion, I feel like Catherine should be there from the beginning stages, and part of her proposal, and the proposal is included in the staff report, does include her attending the ad hoc meetings.
Yeah, my recollection of what she said initially in the study was she took the revenue requirements that were given to her and the assumptions, she took them as a given, and she ran her rate models off of those. And so I envisioned that we would look at the revenue requirements again, and if the committee comes to a conclusion that they want to test something else, she would eventually be given a different set of revenue requirements with some rationale as to why the committee thought they were good or not. But I don't see her running everything until we kind of get through all of the issues, including the perceived inequity issue.
Well,
I mean, she can certainly be there, but I think the idea is that this is a new look at some specific issues that people have raised, and I think part of the importance of public acceptance of what we do here is to feel that it is a fresh, new, independent look. So I'm not saying she's not going to be there at all, but I think it's really the committee and the consultants that do the initial groundwork.
Well, let me ask you this question, and that is, we've heard today that this is an optimistic cash flow scenario. You talk in terms of looking at revenue requirements. Do you contemplate that city staff, city engineering come back and say, for example, with respect to the spray field, while we initially projected it at 150,000 or whatever the number was,
142.
we now think it's 142,000. We now think it's closer to $1 million. And here's the time frame within which we do that. I mean, and then Ms. Hansford is going to have to rerun her model with that new revenue requirement.
No, I think the issue on the revenue requirements was primarily two things. Looking at, first, the number of projects we're trying to accomplish within the time frame and whether that's realistic that we can do it. And second is to look at whether there are other financing mechanisms available for some of the things that are in the CIP program. It's not to tinker, with each little cost estimate. It's more a matter of, is it cash funded or is there another way? I mean, to me, this whole rate thing is, it's a matter of balancing. You have a system and you have revenues, and then the question is, what do you do with that cash? Do you take that cash and do you spend it on projects? Or do you take that cash, you spend some of it on projects, and you have more cash left over that satisfies your bond covenant issue? It's a lot of push and pull. It's a little bit of a Rubik's Cube thing. But by changing some of your assumptions, the bond covenant issue could go away. I'm not saying it's not a significant thing, but for instance, if you left the rates just the way they were, and you took the York Creek Dam out of the water study and paid for it with general funds, you've raised $900,000 of cash to do the York Creek Dam, and that cash falls into the system. So that's just an example of how changing some things can maybe satisfy more goals and possibly reduce the rates. I'm not saying you can never reduce the rates. If you can still satisfy your bond covenants, of course you can reduce the rates. And to the extent you're using cash for that, it might be feasible. So it's something, to look at.
I'd like to make one comment too. Another part of it that I think is part of the beginning of it is looking at our system. What is our system? Who do we sell water to? We buy water from Napa. How is that distributed? We need to, I think, look at those water contracts, understand our system. What is our basic setup, so that it's all kind of laid out on the table in the beginning, so that we really understand the resource. And so that's, I'm all for moving ahead however we decide to do it, but I feel like this is our opportunity as a water provider to fully analyze the system so we all know exactly what we're dealing with and maximize what we've got.
I guess my response to that was that an awful lot of time and effort went into that very question last fall and earlier, where the point was made that on the water side, we operated as a unitary system, and we cannot peg different sources of water to different customers. That's all very clear. And I would hate to see us spend more time revisiting that type of question, quite frankly. And then Ms. Koberstein's motion did make the point, prudently, I think, that we follow, whatever we do, we have to follow good financial practices. And I certainly have been spending considerable time reading this Miller, second edition, Government Finance. I'm hopeful that all members of the committee will take a copy and review it. And it's perfectly clear that it is not prudent practice to use general fund revenue to support the water and wastewater enterprises. They are business enterprises. They should stand on their own 2 feet. And then you get the further problem, as Mr. Doring said, that we've already spent the Measure D money 4 times over. So, but again, I don't think this is really the point of the discussion tonight. The point of the discussion tonight is whether we accept the staff recommendation to move forward here. I think the committee, with its own discussion, is going to have some significant input in terms of how it wants to receive the experts that are assigned to it. They're going to benefit from staff direction, expert direction on that. And if the $5,000 on either of these two runs low, then it seems to me that staff can come back and seek authority for more funds. And if there's good reason for it, I'd be open to it, even though, as I've said at the beginning, I and the Vice Mayor did not vote to go down this road. But having gone down this road, I certainly want it. I want whatever comes out of that committee to be useful, and I also feel strongly that if there are significant changes in the revenue requirements and they've gone up, that the committee should have those numbers in front of them so that what comes back is meaningful to the council.
It seems to me that, the first step in the process, as you stated, is to really define what the role of the ad hoc committee is and define what it is they're going to look at. And I think that is going to drive how we use our consultants. They're going to have 4 or 5 areas that they're going to want to penetrate, drill down on, I think, and so we don't know yet. My understanding is I have a sense that the bond council fees and the municipal advisor are driven by the market. The market is in disarray right now because everybody's waiting to see what the federal government's going to do. Folks are in a waiting mode. We have actually a good time. I think that these numbers could be much higher in a more vigorous market. So I think that's what's being reflected here. I think they're probably being very kind. I agree with you. It could be much higher. Just sort of on topic, but off topic, but it's kind of bothering me, and I don't know how to say this delicately, but at some point we have to look at all these projects and figure out what is mission critical. And that's why I was hoping that Steve would be here, and it's not in any way to devalue you at all moving forward. He just has the experience of putting those numbers together. There are some projects in there that are clearly right at the top, got to do them, regulatory, whatever. And then there's others that fall down lower. And so to me, it's important to have a discussion, not that they will never get done, but the staging of when they get done. And that was something I was kind of looking forward to hearing Steve talk about today, because then it would give me a little bit more comfort. I can clearly see, dam, wastewater treatment plant, those kinds of things are very critical. Those rise up, but there are other items that aren't. So.
Well, I can respond a little bit to that because a major project is the water tower replacement. You remember the photograph we were shown of the base of that? It's barely hanging in there.
I agree. That's one would be, I would consider mission critical. But there are many others that I don't think are mission critical.
Well, another one that's expensive for us, but to me is mission critical, is the monitoring equipment up at Bell Canyon. We have to do that. And an awful lot of it, when you get down to the smaller sums, is just capital equipment that is worn out and beyond its well beyond its useful life, and that has to be addressed too. We cannot afford a failure in these systems. And they are in poor condition, and they are nearing the end of their useful life. That's the message that we've all heard tonight, and we've heard it. Those of us that have been involved with this for some period of time have heard it many times before, unfortunately, and we've just hit the end of the road
You
here.
think we're going to build all this in 5 years?
No, it's over 10 years.
Then it's not mission critical. If it's over 10 years.
No, but with respect to with respect to, and you made the point, I thought that much of this, or a significant portion of this, is regulatory driven. Some of it's litigation driven, perhaps, but it's with respect to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. They've dictated a schedule for us that we cannot afford not to meet. That's where we are.
I'm just saying, Mayor, that we are not experts, and that it would be best practice for us to rely on experts to tell us what is mission critical. You can make all the arguments you want, but you're a lawyer and not a civil engineer, nor am I. And I'd prefer to have somebody who has the expertise so that we can make a fiduciary, responsible judgment in terms of the staging of the projects. I think that is critical for us to do, and I think our community needs to accept that.
Well, my thinking on this is that that's exactly what staff did when it undertook to spell out not just the cost but the timeframes of the various projects that needed to be done in the tables that are in the technical memoranda with respect to both the water and wastewater side. Most certainly, if any of those can be pushed back and it's prudent to do so, so be it. I've got no fixed view on that, but in general, certainly with respect to the large items, I just don't see that happening, unfortunately.
If I may interject, I know of at least 4 of the water projects that are mission critical, and 2 of them are the Bell Canyon Reservoir, the intake tower, and the weir measurement, which is looking at about $4 million right there. We had an RFP closed today for the Bell Canyon intake tower design. We're going to go out to RFP in another month for the inflow weir design, and we're looking at the feasibility study for the wastewater treatment plant, but we're hoping to get that on board so we can go to RFP in June so we can start the phase 1 upgrades, and that's a big chunk of money right up front. So, I may not know all the details of what they have to get done, but those are 5 high-cost, high-dollar projects in both your water and wastewater enterprise funds. Meanwhile, you still got to add up all your funds over the next 10 years and continue to roll out the other projects that might seem lesser, but these are all consultant-driven projects. Staff will be managing those contracts, and we actually are trying to go out to RFP to get some help in here since we are short-staffed at this moment. Thank you.
Good.
And it's my understanding, I've been on the council for 6 years, and I've seen these same CIP items on here year after year, and we just haven't had the money to get to them. And, I think staff did a good job of prioritizing them over a 10-year period. And that was all put into the rate models and to Councilmember Ellsworth's comment about the, getting our heads wrapped around the system itself. We did that at numerous public hearings through the summer when we had the ad hoc committee. We had numerous discussions about just your question, Mary, earlier about the different tanks and pumps and what makes up the system, and we went over contracts and the realization that we can't do tiered rates anymore because of the law, and I think we covered all of that. But again, it's like tonight where we only have two people that are here interested in this issue.
Well, folks are watching at
Well,
home.
I know they're watching, but 2 meetings ago, we had the room filled. Now we've got, and we had this planned for, this is my opinion.
I just want to avoid being positional. I think the council right now is becoming positional. I'm pretty much on board with the whole process, and I'm not arguing and taking a position. I think we have to.
I think you raised some issues.
Wait, one at a time,
but it's
please.
not to be positional or to expect the defense
Then can I
back.
finish? Please.
Let Mr. Doring finish, and then
Okay.
I'll go back to you.
Look at you're boiling, so that means you're in a positional point of view, and I'm trying to avoid that. I'm trying to turn down the heat. That's why I'm intervening. We simply, it's process oriented. No one's saying that these things don't have to get done. It's just a matter of doing it in a way that we get the community buy-in. We don't have it yet, and you can say, well, they're not here. Okay, well, we have to try harder. Okay, so that's on us. This whole thing about blaming the community, it's just really doesn't...
I'm not blaming the community.
Wait, are you finished, Mr. Doring?
I'm disappointed that there's not more people here interested in a subject that they were so interested in 2 meetings ago.
I'm just saying that I'm disappointed that we get into a positional situation and we get defensive, and I think we can all work together and have a good community.
I think we can too.
But I'm feeling that we're getting positional now.
Okay, then let me explain.
Okay.
I hear from council members that like we've never had this discussion before, and I think it's fair to say we've had these discussions before. They've been in public hearings. Very few people showed up, so nobody has any memory that it happened. But they could go back and look at the tapes and see that we've had these discussions. And, I mean, I guess that's back to what the issue is.
Yes.
I mean, I'm for the staff's recommendation of the funds, and I think if it needs to be readjusted after the ad hoc committee gets formed, then we can readjust it. But I think for now that's a good estimation, and I mean, I think it's a waste of funds, but that's just my opinion.
Well, that would be a positional statement.
It was
It doesn't
the same
really, it's not very
positional
productive.
statement I had before.
It's not
All right.
productive, though.
Is there any other?
Okay.
Is there any further comment? Then can I have a motion that we file and receive the report, and that we accept and provide staff direction as recommended by staff?
So moved.
Wait, what direction are we doing? We're filing the report and we're approving the consultant amounts. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
With resolutions to contract with them.
All right. Is there a second? Maybe I missed the second.
I'll second.
All right. Ms. Black?
Could I'm wondering if I can offer an amendment. I would like to increase the two consultant amounts, each of them up to $10,000, so that this committee doesn't get started, and then we might run out of money, and we have to run back here and get more money, because we are on a short time frame to do this. So I'd like to know that we have a cushion.
Let me just speak to that, and that is that if that becomes an issue, I'm prepared to call a special meeting to deal with it. Does that satisfy you?
Sure.
All right. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Ellsworth?
Yes.
Silverstein?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. Okay. That takes us to. I think it's a special item of Councilmember Ellsworth. Discussion of York Creek Dam funding issue regarding more general water issues. Have we covered this?
Yeah, I think we have. Mr. Bell might want to say something, but I think we covered that for now, and it'll get discussed in the thing that we just passed.
All right.
Am I?
Did you want to speak to this at public hearing, or are you prepared to I'll open it up, Mr. Belt, if you wish to speak at public hearing, but this is all going to be the subject of further thrashing out at the ad hoc committee level.
I'd just like to say that the reason we're not prepared tonight is because we don't have the information from the city yet to determine how much the expenses have been to the water customers since 1992. And my original request back in January was that one of the city council members agendize this item, this York Creek Dam, because of my interest in having the general fund pick up the remaining amount of cost to it. But it makes an argument difficult to make if I can't get the information from the city to determine how many the expenses have been. I've told you I've estimated it to be over $2 million that we've paid since 1992 as water customers. The original cost to take the dam down, if it would have been done in a prudent amount of time, would have been probably $1 million to $1.5 million. So because the city councils in the past haven't taken this matter seriously and gotten it taken care of in time, it's costing somewhere around $6.5 million now.
Right.
And I don't think that, basically I would like to be able to prove to you that that the costs have been what I believe they've been, in the neighborhood of $2 to maybe even $2.5 million. We spent $457,000 in 2015 for the final CEQA project to be done, and we've paid over $200,000 in fines and penalties. When you look at the other 31 items I put on the list that I just got from the computer, it's going to be a lot of money. And I understand another source has requested another public records request for a lot more information than I've been able to, that I've generated. So it's going to be very interesting to see how much this project has cost the water customers when it's all said and done, and whether or not the right thing to do would be to say, well, the city management hasn't gotten this thing done in a timely manner, excuse me, and is it fair to the water customers to be paying so much more than we should have had to pay? Okay, that's the only
and
thing I
we
want to say.
understand your point, and it can be presented to the ad hoc committee. Appreciate it. Is there any further discussion at this point? All right, that takes us to the next item, which is the helicopter permit. And on this one, as was alluded to in a prior meeting, I have a perceived family conflict due to ownership by my wife, my sister-in-law, and my 3 children of a property that is adjacent to the Paul Malls property. And without a ruling from the Fair Practices Political Commission, it's best for me to abstain, and therefore I'm going to abstain and leave the room, and wish everybody a good night.
So this is...
Just give me a second.
Oh, yeah.
I should have gotten myself prepared by picking up my papers.
Yes, I will take the lead on this.
I'll need it, and I'll bring it down tomorrow. Thanks. So, good night, everybody. Thanks for attending.
Good night. So 9.5, Councilmember Geoff Ellsworth. Go for it.
This was, excuse me, an item I wanted to put on the agenda. This is not about a specific helicopter permit, but it's about the an objection to any and all private use helicopter landings in Napa County, wanting to get a resolution from the city of St. Helena to present to the county. My concerns are with environmental impacts, noise impacts, effects on people's property values, and I think we have some public comment, and maybe if we hear that first, we can then have a discussion, if that sounds acceptable.
Sure. Is there any initial comments from council? Okay, seeing none, we'll open it up to public comment.
George Kalianidis again, Calistoga. We are aware of a number of helipads that have been approved by the FAA but cannot be operated legally because it's a land use issue. And municipalities and the county have jurisdiction whether, under the land use power that they have, whether they would grant permits. Now, there are flights there which are actually legal because they haven't obtained use permits. I know of 2 of those on Diamond Mountain. I know one on Tubbs Lane. Maybe there's another one on Greenwood Ridge County side. I'm not sure about that. I can't go into the property. There is one on Pritchard Hill, one on Hennessy Ridge, one on Soda Canyon, and I'm sure there are many more. So and I really don't know why the mayor accused himself because this is a generic and has really nothing to do with this particular application. But that application kind of opens the door for this, what I consider pervasive practice. Typically, these helicopter, the people who have those helicopters fly between 6 and 3 times a week. I observed 2 of them over a period of time on Diamond Mountain. So if just those 6 or 7 times 4, you have 28 flights. And San Helena and Yountville are actually in the middle because they fly towards the valley and then take off. But if you could have 100, I don't think that's out of the question, maybe even more. There's taxi service that would be available. There is one being tried in Aspen by Uber. So my request would be to have a resolution to send to the county of the city of San Helena objecting to all private use helicopter flights, landings, because that's the use permit issue, not specifically about the application that's going on. And that's what kind of the impetus, because if that goes through, then the door is open. Thank you.
And the county has an ordinance against helipads at commercial?
At wineries. That is forbidden. That was enacted in 2004. And the reason I'm involved is because I was involved in actually starting this ordinance. And I've been subject to a lot of trauma by neighbors with helicopters because it's complaint-driven. But there's no way to know in these large properties whether somebody lands there. So everybody was on edge the minute they heard the helicopter. They call everybody and say, did they land or didn't they land there? Because that would be, you have to photograph it and document it and send it to the county. We did it. The county just sent a letter. It didn't help. So we are at the beginning stage, and if we don't catch it right now, it's going to be almost impossible to stop. Thank you.
Good evening, council members. My name is Robert Purcell. I live at 2424 North 3rd Avenue in Napa, California. Thank you for allowing me to speak. The issue that we're dealing with is a little bit of a residual from a bygone era when Napa County passed the first ag preserve ordinance in 1976. People were still crop dusting. They crop dusted grapes with helicopters, fixed wings planes, other crops. So there was an acknowledgement back in 1976 that people needed personal use airports for those purposes. Even back in 1976, it was acknowledged that it really wasn't a use the county wanted. So as part of the original Ordinance 511 that established the ag preserve, it's buried in page 37 that by use permit in any zoning district, you can have a personal use heliport. Flash forward about 50 years here, and we haven't crop dusted since the 1990s. We're 20 plus years past that. That little snippet of code has remained in the Napa County ordinance. It still exists. They now call it a personal use heliport. They distinguish out ag as something else. Napa County has a precedent for denial of these applications. We haven't approved one since 1979. Frankly, most people go into the county requesting them. County staff says, hey, you're never going to get this, go away. And most people do. Obviously, we're faced now a situation where we have an applicant that's testing the limits of the county's code in this effect. We're asking the city of St. Helena to join the city of Napa in voicing its concern over what the cumulative impact would be of allowing personal use heliports in Napa Valley. If you allow one, you're going to allow 100. There's a lot of people, as you know, who come up to Napa Valley, not just in St. Helena, but all over the valley, from Silicon Valley, the East Bay, San Francisco. They would like nothing more to commute on a weekly basis in and out of the valley on a helicopter, saving themselves the 2 hours without traffic, 4 hours with traffic to get here each week. We see this as a basic quality of life issue. We see it as a business issue. The city of St. Helena, our wineries, our businesses all rely on a quality, quiet, bucolic setting in which to attract winery tourism to our valley. And we think this is a critical issue for the city of St. Helena to weigh in upon. If these applications get approved in the county, you'll have absolutely no control over the result. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
You may.
Was there some study about impacts to property values from being next to one of these?
There's actually been 3 studies over time. In 1994, Buzell and Hamilton, a very reputable firm, estimated the impact at about 18%. There have been that said it's 10%. There's been some that have said as high as 27%. Those are average numbers, and what all the studies indicate is that the proximity to the airport is one variable. The home value is a second variable. So you can imagine a community like St. Helena where home values are generally high. People are going to be particularly affected by the presence of a heliport nearby their property and less likely to want to purchase them as a result. And I will further say, I happen to be a licensed California real estate broker. I have 10 plus years experience, so I can definitively say if a helicopter goes in, it's going to create a 2-mile disclosure radius for anyone around that. So you could very well have someone in St. Helena outside the city limits get a successful application that would create a disclosure requirement 2 miles around that could easily stretch inside the city limit, so that all the property owners within that city limit would have to disclose on the top line transfer disclosure statement that they live next to a heliport, and that would obviously just diminish their property values.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
I don't want to be redundant. I mean, these gentlemen said most of everything I wanted to say, but I think we should respect what the wineries knew in terms of our brand in 2004, that it is not going to benefit the very business that supports this whole area, in their opinion, and certainly in my opinion. It would just be a further corruption of our quality of life as far as I'm concerned. And, the questions of who would oversee abuses. Part of that was mentioned. You can't even tell where they're landing. What if, how are you going to count them? Who would oversee that? It's enforcement of the rules that are there are always a difficulty. And furthermore, and this is just a value thing, it's intrusive elitism as far as I'm concerned. And I just really hope that you can support not letting this happen, because the cumulative effects would be, I think, hurt everything about this valley. So,
okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment. Council discussion.
Well, I definitely support the idea of us adopting a resolution opposing this. I think there's a lot of good language in the pieces that we have in our agenda materials, to which I would only add the issue about enforcement and also property values. I don't know how quickly we need to do this. It's not clear to me. This one case, I think, is being heard tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yes, tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
I don't know how we expedite a resolution. It'll take us like 2 more weeks to get something on file.
Yeah.
If we could have I think it's a very important issue, and we should give it immediate attention.
Well, it seems to me that we're conflating the issues. The presentation was about the effects of helicopters in general in our community, and not so much on this particular project. I hesitate for the city to weigh in on that particular project. So I want to sort of delink and go a little bit more slowly in terms of the analysis of how we proceed. I can see all kinds of exceptions to the rule, and we don't, or unintended consequences, put it that way, in terms of taking positions one way or another. In terms of the letter we draft or the resolution of support or opposition, I would like to have it articulate and based on fact, and not sort of my gut level feeling is, I don't want any helicopters over my house. That's my gut level reaction. But my lawyer's brain is saying, slow it down, let's study this a little bit, make sure that what the position we take is one that is makes sense, is logical, well thought out, because I assume that Yountville and Calistoga will soon be following, maybe looking at it also. So those are my general concerns. I think it is important for the city of St. Helene to weigh in, but we need to do it intelligently.
I wasn't suggesting that we weigh in on this one particular thing. It's just it will set a precedent if it is granted. I think that there is good language, I guess I would say, in both of these pieces that we have about some of the detrimental effects of allowing this to happen. So,
Jeff?
I agree with you, Paul, that jumping in too quickly, you can make mistakes. So how it's written, I think, is important. The fact that the hearing is tomorrow on this one particular project, but because it is precedent setting, I'm wondering if if the council can make a statement on the general aspect of it that doesn't put us in a bad position, that we can make a general statement that we have concerns, and I can take those to the meeting tomorrow personally, or we could draft something. But my thought is, I agree with you that to make a strong statement and not really figure out what exactly we're saying, we've got to be careful.
Okay, my turn. I'm going to make full disclosure that I am a licensed helicopter pilot. So I disagree with some of the things in your letters, and I agree with Councilmember Doring that if we're going to craft a resolution in regards to helicopter landings and takeoffs within our area, and I'm talking about a much wider area than the city limits, I think we need to study it a little bit more. I didn't have a chance to go through the whole EIR for this application, but I did read quite a bit of it over the weekend. One of the things that one of the commenters said was that Napa weighed in. The only thing that I saw that Napa weighed in on was the flight path, because they were concerned that one of the flight paths went over the city, and there was a response back regarding that. I didn't see where the city of Napa made any resolutions or went beyond that comment. So.
My reading, in my reading, I concluded the same, that the Napa letter from Rick Tooker was lukewarm at best. They showed concerns, but it was certainly not a resolution of the whole council. It was more on the environmental side, a letter in the IRR that was responded to.
So I don't know exactly where to go from here. If the council wants to make a motion to, or give staff direction to do a little bit more research and maybe provide some of the documentation from this use permit that we can take a look at and have a discussion. Maybe that's the way we should go.
Yeah, that sounds. One of the concerns that I have is that we have a rural area, and that you're bringing this heavy-duty use that. There are fire issues, there are leakage issues, chemical issues. So I think there's a lot of possible impacts, and so I think having that spelled out and then we discuss it and see where we all sit, because there's a lot of parts to it, and to have this meeting the night before this other thing, it doesn't give much time to consider.
I hesitate to use our staff. I think it's going to have to be some of the council members are going to do some of the work, frankly. Given the items that we have on our staff's tables right now, I think it would be not not the best use of their time. I think it is a critically important issue, though. I'm wondering, I don't know if Jeff, if you wanted to sort of do some of the work and come back in a couple of weeks with a proposed letter or a proposed resolution?
I can put something together, and then I'm just wondering if I go to this meeting tomorrow, can I speak for the council saying we have concerns?
I'm okay with that word.
You know, just something as brief as that. I don't want to...
That we don't get enough flights up here?
What? Any thoughts on saying something tomorrow?
I think you can say that we're willing to study the issue, and
okay.
And I mean, maybe this is an issue that the council looks at taking to the Board of Supervisors sometime in the future to get the board to take a look at this on a broader basis.
Okay.
Is that good?
For the record, could we just get the consensus, just so I know exactly how to record the not motion, but the consensus of council? Could you repeat it for me, please?
That we're going to move forward with looking at the issue of helicopter landings and takeoffs in our general area, and I don't know.
Can I use the word concern?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll look further. We have concerns about helicopter use in the county, and we'll move forward on studying something like that. Developing a policy, and it's
Private helicopter use.
Private helicopter use. Sorry, because it's getting late.
Got that?
Okay.
Okay. Okay. If that's it, call for adjournment.